that all men are created equal, and that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness.
하늘과 푸른 바다 갈매기도 그대도 날 사랑했죠.
Jeju Island is a special autonomous self-governing province of Korea, lying about 60 miles from the southern tip of the mainland. Jeju is a volcanic island about 45 miles east to west and 25 miles north to south. Kangjong village is located on the southern edge of the island, where the main industries are farming and fishing. Gurumbi is the name given to a huge basalt rock formation on the coast in Kangjong village, which the villagers believe is alive, and where for centuries they have prayed, recreated, and held special ceremonies and events.
It's an island in the East China Sea.
Located strategically in the East China Sea, the island's potential to find itself once again in the crosshairs of war increases exponentially with the construction of a naval base to accommodate 20 warships, including Aegis destroyers equipped with anti-ballistic missiles, aircraft carriers, and nuclear submarines. The East China Sea is China's primary trade route, and Jeju is only 304 miles from Shanghai, 1,056 miles from Hong Kong, and 584 miles from Beijing.
It's Jeju Island. There are crabs and frogs and dolphins and fish and coral and volcanic rock and a beautiful place I've never been. In an island in the East China Sea.
Kangjong village is only 1 mile from Tiger Island, a UNESCO-designated biosphere preserve and World Heritage Site.
It's Jeju Island. They want to put nuclear missiles and submarines and aircraft carriers in this beautiful place I've never been.
It is completely illogical to construct a base in this place because Kangjong is not a deep harbor port, but entirely exposed to the sea and the typhoons that regularly batter this coast. In the summer of 2012, Typhoon Bolaven destroyed 2 of the massive caissons, each costing millions of dollars, and proving that the design of this base is fundamentally flawed.
Project force against China in a beautiful place I've never been. From an island in the East China Sea. From Jeju Island. Island of peace. From Jeju Island. Now I'm crying for a beautiful place I've never been. It's an island in the East China Sea. It's Jeju Island. Island of peace. It's Jeju Island.
Well, I've been very aware of the protest of this base and have signed petitions against it and all of that, but I've had trouble understanding the logic for it. Okinawa is within very close shooting range of most targets that we might have in Northeast Asia. I mean, we were flying B-52s to Vietnam to bomb Vietnam from Okinawa. We certainly can hit most of the Chinese mainland. Our Navy has bases all over the Pacific. Furthermore, we don't really need a bases different than those we have in Japan. I mean, Yokosuka near Tokyo is the base of the Pacific Fleet. It was the base of the Japanese Navy during and before World War II. It's a huge installation. We have Sasebo. We have 2 or 3 other naval bases in Japan. Why do we need a naval base on Jeju Island? And why does the Korean Navy need a base there? Chinhae is its biggest naval base near Busan. It's a stone's throw from Jeju Island. So I've never quite understood the rationale for this base.
This is the exterior of a museum commemorating April 3rd, the beginning of the massacre of as many as 60,000 men, women, and children on Jeju Island in 1948. The scorched earth operation continued into the Korean War, when an estimated 200,000 civilians fleeing the war were killed, many ordered shot dead by American forces.
그래가지고 우리 아버지를 이제 제일 먼저 총으로 쐈다. 눈앞에서 우리 앞에서. 이제 총으로 쏘니까 우리 할아버지가 뭐였고 그러니까 우리 아들도 죽였는지 나도 죽여달라고. 아들 없는데 난 사람 뭐냐. 그러니까 이제 또 우리 할아버지도 지금 총으로 쏴버리고 또 이제 우리 할머니가 있다가 이런 요새 난 나름 할머니인데 나도 아들도 없고 할아버지도 죽어버린데 난 사람 뭐냐. 그러니까 우리 할머니까지 이제 총으로 쏴배가지고 그날 있긴 해. 다 매장을 했습니다. 할머니 할아버지 아버지를.
비가 내리면 어디가 하늘이고 어디가
그때도 명령제이거든 게 아니도 이엔 큰일이거든. 그러니까 거기서 떡 쳐야 되니까 떡을 다시 나버렸지만 거기에다 그냥 한 7, 80명 그냥 뭐 딱 쏘아 그냥 지름비 하나 불 붙여놓으니까 이거 거머이거든. 야 이거 사람이 이런 놈들이 어디냐 이 죽일 놈들 이거 죽여도 곱게라 죽이지 이거 그냥 기르면 다 하는데 하이가 되더라고. 저만이라 이 굴속에 이제 들어가가지고 그냥 감옥에는 각각 해가니까 우선 기왕 죽어도 해가 마딱 이제 쏘아 저기 얼굴이 아프다 거면 이라도 못 박게 맨날 해가지고.
그 총살의 현장에서 기적적으로 살아남은 김태준 할아버지. 당시 23살이었던 청년 김태준은 등과 어깨 쪽지 그리고 팔에 3발의 총을 맞고도 다행히 목숨을 건졌다.
안 되고 이 뒤에서 바늘 끔시실걸 하니까
그는 그날의 상황을 결코 잊을 수가 없다.
내과에서 죽였거든. 이 사람들이 그 뒤에서 조종을 하더만 이건 이제 혼자리에서 100명을 이제 총살시켰으니까 총살시키고 그 사람들이 전부 이제 불 붙여버리고 막 그렇게 된 거죠.
말하면 어느 누구 하나가 홀로 일어나 아니라고 말할 사람.
이 아마 그저 한 3만 명은 넘을 거예요. 사성폭동에.
네, 그 부대 같은 거요.
그 다음에 제가 간 다음에는 완전히 남아있는 잔디를 다 타온 거니까. 그거는 그렇게 숫자고 적죠. 다만 유치장을 넘어가놨어요. 그저 모르구다 하면은 무조건 갖다 넣는 거예요.
있어 말로. 그래서 별명이 있어요. 모르고다. 근데 모르면 모른다고 하면 모르고다 하면 모르면 제주도 원주민은 아주 순박하니까 적절한 답변이에요. 그런데 모르고다 하면 그냥 무턱 대놓고 청산하고 심지어는 죽여가지고 머리를 잘라 축장에다 꽂아놓고 살벌이 싹이 없다고요. 전범이. 그거는 우리가 경기대 시에 너무 잘못한 거예요. 너무 나갔어요. 남이 적지를 정리해가지고 해도 그렇게 못하는데 동족을 그렇게 했다는 거.
In order to understand why the people of Jeju are against the Navy base, it is important to go back at least as far as 1945, when Korea was liberated from 35 years of Japanese occupation. More than 1 million Koreans were forced to work in factories in Japan, and thousands of Korean women and girls became sex slaves of the Japanese military. After the U.S. dropped atomic bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, Japan formally surrendered to General Douglas MacArthur in 1945. With the lowering of the Japanese flag and the raising of the Stars and Stripes, Korea went from one occupation to another when the U.S. military under General MacArthur took control of the country and the military. When the U.S. military command abandoned its promise to hold elections on the entire Korean peninsula and instead attempted to force an election on the South Korean people, effectively dividing the North from the South, the fiercely independent people of Jeju resisted and rose up against the American military government of Korea. March 1st, 1947, was the turning point in the modern history of Jeju when police, under the control of the United States military government, opened fire on a crowd and killed 6 protesters. "35 people were rounded up and packed like sardines in a 36-square-foot cell. This tragic event triggered the April 3rd uprising. The brutal crackdown continued in March of 1948 when 3 young men were tortured to death by police. In another incident, a middle school student was hung upside down and clubbed to death by police who said the student died of a chronic disease. On May 5, 1948, General William F. Dean, the U.S. Army military governor in Korea, visited Jeju and presided over a closed-door meeting including the leadership of the Army and police and the civil administration of the police department. The following day, the U.S. military government in Korea then dismissed Regiment Commander Kim Ik-yul for wanting to use diplomacy to end the uprising. Amid election-related clashes nationwide, the uprising on Jeju put the U.S. military government in Korea on the highest alert. As the elections on Jeju were declared null and void, the U.S. military government in Korea dispatched Colonel Rothwell H. Brown, commander of the 20th Regiment, to Jeju and instructed him to command crackdown operations on the uprising. On May 22, 1948, Colonel Brown developed a plan to suppress the rebellion. He ordered the Korean constabulary and police to force the villages out of the mountains and to the coast, and to secure all areas from the coast to 2.5 miles.
Alright, well, I think I fixed my mic, which is important, but let's keep trying to fix yours. Oh, that might be why. There's the problem right there. Alright, give me another 1 2 1 2.
Hello, hello.
There we fucking go!
Chat, can you hear me?
Yeah, I think we figured it out. So, chat, how we doing today? How you doing, David? Did you get home all right? How we feeling today, Pat? Yeah. There's a water crisis. What happened there? Yeah, but like, are they like harmful chemicals? Or is it just like, are they like the kind of like supplemental chemicals that like, you know? Oh, fucking damn it. All right. How about now? Is he still muted?
Can you hear me now?
Should be able to hear him a lot better now.
Hello?
Yeah, no, they can definitely hear you now.
Okay, thank you.
I mean, again, what kind of leftist fucking anything would this be without both video and audio issues? Ugh. Yeah, but like, you know, if they haven't told you what kind of chemicals they are, how do you know they're not like, you know, I don't know, like Flintstone vitamins chemical spill?
They sent a citywide alert not to drink tap water.
Yeah, because you're not paying for the Flintstone vitamins that they accidentally leaked into the water. Watch. Flintstone vitamins, they're going to be like selling bottled water in Philly, right? It's like with naturally flavored, you know, supplemental vitamins.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we're pretty stressed out about it.
I'm sorry, but I'm trying to like, you know, make a lighthearted moment out of it, but I can tell this has got you stressed out.
Yeah.
But hey, I mean, like, you know, you're moving to another part that may not be affected by it soon, right?
No. No, it's a citywide issue.
Did they say like when the water boiling advisory is going to be lifted?
No, they said as of right now we can like harvest the water because it hasn't started using the water from like right now. It's like the water that's I guess in the plant like is like water from before the spill. Like
right.
It's gonna take about 24 hours for like the water that's actually from the Delaware that is currently tainted to start going through the water processing plant. So they said up until midnight tomorrow you can still drink the tap water. And that you should be start like saving. It said that you should start saving some up.
Have you filled the bathtub yet?
Saying that Pat's volume is low.
How the hell is Pat's volume low?
Let's see here. What about now?
Give me a 1-2-1-2 on the can.
Is it louder now?
There you go. That's it. Crisp.
Is it louder now?
It's so much louder now. I'm gonna have to lower you. But don't touch anything on your end.
All right. Sometimes this thing has like a touchpad volume thing on it. Sometimes. Also, I think I'm a little less energized today. Also.
Yeah. Well,
not only am I exhausted from working full time, school full time, and you know whatever I do on this stream preparation, but also I was out pretty late last night. I didn't get home until like 3:30 in the morning, and then it's just been a long day. So we're having a rough go at it, boys, but boys and girls and others.
And others.
But it's a little you know, we'll persevere. You know, you can't be you know.
Yeah,
maybe be completely fucking jazzed every single day.
Maybe the park, you know, last night was just a little bit stretching a little bit too thin. Maybe we should have just kept it at the statue and then, like, you know, called it a day.
I don't think it would have made that much of a difference. What are we talking about? We only like 30 minutes or so.
Something like that. So yeah, your hosts, right? Your streamers, Johnny Dialectically and Pat. We went out to the Revolutionary Tracks at the New Yorican Poets Cafe in New York.
Mm-hmm.
We also met up with fellow coworker and streamer David Tavares, right?
Mm-hmm. That's correct.
I'd say it was pretty fun. We saw an elected official. Yeah, we saw a lady, sing. That was really good. We saw a lot of.
I was into Bruja.
Yeah, Bruja is cool. We saw a lot of poetry. All right. What would you say your favorite poetry was, Pat?
Probably the cock is so big, Poppy.
Stretch My Whole Poppy.
Stretch My Whole Poppy was probably my favorite one.
Yeah, that was kind of a banger.
That was kind of the highlight of the night.
Yeah, with a child, just right there
with a child present. Yeah.
Yeah. So it turns out it was kid friendly. You're not gonna get that in every poet cafe in New York.
Do you want to let the people know that you're currently on a treadmill? Because if not, the movements you're doing look extremely awkward.
I know. I was gonna wait until somebody said something. I mean, But no, I'm not gonna acknowledge it until somebody says something about it. Oh, not that one. Oh.
Maverick was about to ask.
Were they though? Wanting to do more walking? Dude, I love walking. I don't think you understand just what's wrong with me.
That you just want to keep on walking?
Just gonna keep on walking. Let me just edit this thing right at the top of the screen. Today's discussion. Killing Hope by William Blum.
So today will be the scheduled Korea section of Killing Hope, which was sidetracked by my obsessive nature to discuss all the things that I had previously written about Korean history, so that everyone hopefully had more of a more detailed background of why the Korean War started, so we weren't just kind of jumping right into it, leaving out a lot of that context. So yeah, today we will be resuming our section by section breakdown of Killing Hope. Thank you for bearing with my neurotic tendencies and being with us on last Sunday for that. Last Wednesday.
No, wait, was it? Yeah, no, it was Wednesday. All right. So, Korea, 1945.
Another thing, double pat. Does double pat mean you can hear an echo, or?
Oh, fuck. Okay, how about now?
Hello, 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 hello. Is this single pat or double pat?
Oh, fuck me. God damn it.
They said it's good now.
Okay.
There can only be one.
If there's more audio issues, just keep letting me know and I'll keep messing around with it and maybe it'll get, listenable, but I'm not making any promises. So, Korea, 1945 to 1953.
Yeah, I think obviously if you were here with us on Wednesday, you probably got a pretty significant breakdown of how the United States was involved in Korea after World War II, which then ultimately led to the Korean War. We're going to kind of build upon that. We're going to go obviously tread over some topics that we already talked about on Wednesday, but also we're going to have some new details that we got out of William Blum's book. So yeah, part of me was like, maybe we should just skip this all together, but that would be pretty anti-subversive history style to, just have me replace the author with my, opinions. So, I think it's still going to be important to just reinforce everything that we talked about a couple days ago, and also add a few new little sprinkles as now we're actually getting into the war period.
Yeah. Also, I think that it definitely says a lot about us that it took us what a good 6 months of being on the air before we had an episode where it's just like, no, this is just independently from one of us, and we're not basing this off of well, technically we were kind of basing it off of or you were.
The entire thing was based off of the number of historians who I read and relied upon.
Right.
So I mean, So
it
definitely wasn't. I didn't whip that together off of Wikipedia or something like that.
True. So, Korea, 1945 to 1953. How is it that the Korean War escaped the protests which surrounded the war in Vietnam? Everything we've come to love and cherish about Vietnam had its forerunner in Korea. The support of a corrupt tyranny, the atrocities, the napalm, the mass slaughter of civilians, the cities and villages laid to waste, the calculated management of the news, the sabotaging of peace talks. But the American people were convinced that the war in Korea was an unambiguous case of one country invading another without provocation. A case of the bad guys attacking the good guys who were being saved by the even better guys. None of the historical, political, and moral uncertainty that was the dilemma of Vietnam. The Korean War was seen to have begun in a specific manner. North Korea attacked South Korea in the early morning of the 25th of June, 1950, while Vietnam, no one seemed to know how it all began, or when, or even why.
Yeah, that might be an interesting discussion to kind of kick things off here. Just kind of talk about the differences of social perception of the Vietnam War and the Korean War, why that is. I think there's some pretty obvious reasons, but just for the sake of discussion and the fact that we are in front of cameras talking about this with people listening to us, that I guess we could have that discussion. Because honestly, it's funny because even when you talk about the perceptions, Korea is often referred to as the forgotten war because unlike Vietnam, it's scantily even recalled in the list of U.S. wars, despite it being probably this, the single most, if not tied for the most horrific effort of United States warfare to ever exist.
Right. It's not like, they didn't put any effort into nearly genociding the people of Korea.
Correct.
It's not like this was some small, very few boots on the ground, very, very little mobilization for this war effort. If anything, there were some people that almost considered it the start of World War III. And it for me, it just kind of reminds me of Iraq and Afghanistan, where it's kind of pushed to the back of people's heads, and some people weren't even aware that we were there, or that for how long we were there. And when you ask people why, they're just kind of our freedoms.
Well, and I mean, for North and South Korea, I think that's the binary that really motivated me to delve into this topic a little bit, because I think if you're going to talk about systems socialism or capitalism, there's a very, 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 very reductive kind of view of things that sometimes PragerU or Newt Gingrich or others of that ilk will take and just be oh, you're interested in socialism? There's a fantastic case study on that. Look at North Korea and look in South Korea.
Right.
We're done. And there's a meme that goes around. Let's see if I can find it real quick. Have you ever seen that meme where it's an aerial view of North and South Korea with like lights.
Yes.
And they're like, North Korea lights. Let me see. Yeah. It's like a which system would you rather live under type of meme. I'm trying to see if I can find, like, I see a lot of the pictures of it, but I'm trying to see if there's one like where that actually has like the caption that I'm looking for. Okay, here you go. Can you bring this up real quick?
Yes. You sending it to me on
Yeah. So this is kind of like one of the main reasons why I think I got into this subject so deeply, especially because it's like even Vietnam, like I think even by the time I was in high school, I was aware that Vietnam was kind of a farce, and if not a farce, that it was like a grave injustice by the United States. But I think like with all of the propaganda that still surrounds North Korea to this day, that I was far more ignorant to things that actually happened there. And so then when I got a hold of this first book, I don't have the books, all the books up here anymore. Asia's Unknown Uprisings, Volume 1, South Korean Social Movements. It was the first time that I ever heard anything other than an extremely skewed American perspective of the Korean War, the situation in Korea that predated the Korean War.
Right.
And it was so surprising to me that I almost couldn't believe what I was reading. And I think that's what seriously motivated me to go deeper and deeper and deeper into the subject. Because, you know, these are the kind of things, you know, there's speeches from Newt Gingrich, there's PragerU videos that kind of go into this dynamic where they pretty much say what this meme is, and they just go, hey, look, you want to see the difference between capitalism, socialism? South Korea, North Korea. And
socialism when no lights.
Yeah, it's just like the most ahistorical, simplistic, reductionist view of like a major historical event. You know, both before and after the war. I mean, everything, all the atrocities that were committed in South Korea, in terms of subjugating it into an American client state, and then the many decades of dictatorship that preceded the war. You know, as if Syngman Rhee or Parkley Camp or Hung Ju Chuan, I believe. I'm sorry, I might be butchering that third one because I'm as we get closer to present day, I'm less and less knowledgeable on the situation in Korea, but you know, the procession of dictators that you know, I held up the book last time. I showed that there was demonstrations in the streets up until the 90s, throughout the 80s to the 90s,
well into the 2000s, I believe, too.
Right, and trying to hold that up as some kind of like a free market paradise or something like that is just so incorrect that it's like, you know, it at face value, it just dissolves into absurdity if you've read like a single book over the history of South Korea. But unfortunately, we do have like a very ahistoric population here in the United States, and you know, they'll pretty much just lap up a meme like this, and they'll shut the book on that situation.
Right, like they won't read into anything, and even for people that were around and like living for that time, won't recall that like the DPRK was economically outpacing, you know, the southern counterpart for most of its history since the war.
Yeah,
that's even correct. This picture, right, that we have up on screen is a doctored picture.
Yeah, I was about to say, I don't even know if this is a real picture.
It's not. None of them are. None of them are an actual real picture. All of them are doctored. This is literally.
You've ever seen it. Like, even if you're like the most ardent, you know, well, actually, is that supposed to be, that's Pyongyang right there, that little yellow part in the beginning? I mean, I guess you're saying that, I guess they are at least humoring the fact that Pyongyang is a city.
Right. Well, their big push has always been that, like, well, it's the evil dictator family that is praised like a living god, that any foreign aid we give them is just used for the dictator god family and those closest to them in the main capital city for them to get all the electricity and all the food and all the goodies that we send them out of the goodwill to our heart.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, meanwhile, we can't even see the stars.
I think Cicero Fields here kind of summed it up very well here, that After World War II, there was less questioning of the government and the Red Scare. There was less independent news coverage of what was happening. So that same kind of like counterculture, anti-war movement was not present at this time.
Yeah.
Outside of some individuals like, Malcolm X, for example, who was in prison at this time and sent a letter to Truman pretty much being like, yo, I'm a communist and fuck your war in Korea. And also, I will be joining the Japanese military when I get out of prison.
Which is like two sides of like no.
So yeah, we can move forward here, but yeah, that was just kind of this meme here is a kind of a big illustration of just why I kind of got so deep into this subject. So, just moving off of that dynamic there between Korea and Vietnam, there was little in the way of accusations about American imperialism in Korea. The United States, after all, was fighting as part of a United Nations army. What was there to protest about? And of course, there was McCarthyism, so prevalent in the early 1950s, which further served to inhibit protest. There were, in fact, rather different interpretations to be made of what the war was all about, how it was being conducted, and even how it began, but these quickly succumbed to the heat of war fever. So just to kind of, springboard off of what Cicero said, obviously Red Scare McCarthyism was in full effect at this time. So any kind of like protest of an American war against a communist, communist threat would be met with not even just like criticism, but like you would probably have your life destroyed for it. Also, I think Americans were far more susceptible to just like regular news TV propaganda at this point than they would have been like a decade or 15 years later.
Right. Also, Cicero Fields. That's wild.
Yeah, it's very interesting.
That is very, very interesting.
I think the next slide is Truman. Yeah, I think that this is interesting to listen to because if anybody remembers, during the Greece chapter, we listened to at least a portion of his Truman Doctrine speech as it related to Greece and Turkey. Well, like Greece and Turkey were like the primary focuses on it that we were listening to. This is kind of like the next phase of that Trumanite world police type of thing where he explicitly says like we are going to war with Korea.
USIS presents President Truman reports on Korea.
On Sunday, June 25th, Communist forces attacked the Republic of Korea. This attack has made it clear beyond all doubt that the international communist movement is willing to use armed invasion to conquer independent nations. An act of aggression.
Yes.
Such as...
So I'm just going to intervene at times because, like, obviously I hope that you were here to hear everything that we talked about on the last stream. But if you weren't, if you were here for that, or if you have, like, prior knowledge of the post-World War II situation in Korea and what the United States government did and what the, Republic of Korea / Sigmund Rhee movement were up to, just listening to Truman, make some of these claims is in like, wow, international communism knows no bounds and they will just do anything to just disrupt peace. And it's like, if you were just listening to the Jeju Island documentary that we were listening to at the opening of this, there was just horrific descriptions of war crimes carried out either directly by the United States or like pretty much with the supervision of the United States with the ROK soldiers. So, or the rightist, the fascist youth groups, which often conducted massacres at the behest of Sigmund Rhee or U.S. advisors. So just listening to this and the markedly contrasting, situation going on in the north of the country. It is just, couldn't be further from the truth, the picture that old Truman here is painting. And I hate him more every second that he talks, to be honest.
As you should. Also, how are you doing, Ross? I hope you're having a good day.
It creates a very real danger to the security of all free nations. The communist invasion was launched in great force with planes, tanks, and artillery.
Wait, the North Koreans had planes? Did I hear that right?
I'm not sure. But, this is the other thing too, and this is a big thing that we're going to be discussing today, is the start of the Korean War, because this the traditional narrative is that North Koreans just came down under the 38th parallel and started fucking shit up. Whoa, this is a crazy act of aggression. We got to go to war now. These bloodthirsty communists are coming down. So there's two things that we need to discuss about this. One is that arguably South Korea started the war, at least in this, series of issues when it comes to the 38th parallel and who crossed it. But what's so much more important than that is that you are arbitrarily deciding when this war started in a really, really negligent way.
Yeah.
Because, in my opinion, the war began when the United States military government was arranged dictatorially in South Korea, when martial law was declared, when the sovereignty of the PRK was dissolved, when hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people who were protesting were being imprisoned, put into concentration camps, summarily executed by an foreign occupying force, and the popular sentiment of the entire Korean peninsula was rejected wholesale. Well, not wholesale. I guess there were some collaborators and people that were interested in that type of thing happening, but the majority's will was rejected. So, who's to say when the Korean War started?
I mean,
because
dude, you made a point.
Did the Korean War start when people were being massacred on Jeju? Did the Korean War start when people were being massacred throughout Yeosu? Where people, it's like, in my opinion, when an invading army occupies, declares martial law, executes people, has military tanks, is working with Japanese collaborators, those all seem like declarations of war to me. If I was in the PRK and we were, operating our nation now that we're free from occupiers, that seems like one of the most direct acts of war that I could really think of.
I mean, is there even a time where, especially the U.S., isn't acting in aggression to the Korean people? We can go back as far, like you were talking about the other day, the dude trying to steal the bones of like the father of the region.
German. Yeah, that was a German man.
I mean,
but still, yeah.
My point still stands.
General Sherman. But yeah, so and obviously we're not, obviously for us in our chat, we are obviously aware of the tactics of the United States and the CIA and the military. But, we're just kind of bringing up what the general narrative is here, because you can go into I think even if you go to the Wikipedia page, it's like, the Korean War started when North Korean forces stepped over the 38th parallel and attacked Haeju, I think the name of the town is. And it's just, if you remember everything that we were talking about on Wednesday, the millions of people, the concentration camps, the mass graves that were being dug, and then Jeju Island, what we were just listening to at the opening of this, like, to say that there wasn't a war going on already is just so, arbitrary.
But
they just needed to wait to the time that somebody just stuck a pinky toe over the 38th parallel to be like, oh, there it is. They started a war. They're the bad guys.
And the speed with which it was followed up make it perfectly plain that it had been plotted long in advance. 52 of the 59 countries which are members of the United Nations have given their support to the action taken by the Security Council to restore peace in Korea. Under the flag of the United Nations, a unified command has been established for all forces of the members of the United Nations fighting in Korea. General Douglas MacArthur is the commander of this combined force. The prompt action of the United Nations to put down lawless aggression and the prompt response to this action by free peoples all over the world will stand as a landmark in mankind's long search for a rule of law among nations. We know that it will take a hard, tough fight to halt the invasion, to drive the communists back. The invaders have been provided with enough equipment and supplies for a long campaign. They overwhelmed the lightly armed defense forces of the Korean Republic in the first days and drove southward. These and other reports I've received show that our armed forces are acting with close teamwork and efficiency to meet the problems facing us in Korea. These reports are reassuring, but they also show that the job ahead of us in Korea is long and difficult. The fact that communist forces have invaded Korea is a warning that there may be similar acts of aggression in other parts of the world. free nations must be on their guard, more than ever before, against this kind of sneak attack. It is obvious that we must increase our military strength and preparedness immediately.
I love the idea of it being a sneak attack.
Or
You know
or
what
an
I mean?
invasion
Like,
of that, for that matter.
yeah, like it's like, you know, you have your fucking, you know, you have your tanks and your soldiers and your military personnel all in half of our country, and then like it's like, oh, how'd you sneak up on us like that? Whoa, you know what I mean? Like, what gives you the right to have any problem with this?
I know that like we just got here and that we're reinstating the people that literally have colonized you for almost a century and kind of banned your culture and ethnically cleansed you and whatnot, but like you guys are the invaders.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. It's when you and it's weird because it seems so obvious now, but for me, prior to reading any of these books or anything like that, this would have made perfect sense to me. Like I would have been like, yeah, like okay, well, okay, so there was aggression there. We need to figure that out. Like when it's like,
I hope that
it's interesting how you have to walk back State Department narratives on things, because like, you know, I grew up in this culture here in the United States, watching the news, going to the schools, reading like the mainstream history narratives, and you know, you just kind of they just seem so natural, and then like just reading like, you know, a book or two about it, you're like, wait a minute, like this doesn't even make sense. Why are we even in Korea? How can we be invaded in Korea by Koreans?
there's not even that many of us there.
Yeah.
My hope is that like my friend that one time said to me that like the DPRK is the most warlike culture, right? And all of this other stuff. I really hope that if he is ever watching this, right, later in life, that he realizes how goofy and silly and ahistorical that statement is.
Right, because for me, there's no, like, you know, after, especially, you could probably pretty much read just this book that we're reading right now, and you would kind of be forced to concede that the United States is not only the most warmongering nation in the world, but also the biggest antithesis to the concept of democracy,
peace,
or self-determination, or many of the things that we uphold as virtues of this nation.
Just peace in general.
The farce of the American project is stripped naked of its content.
The entire construction of America at every single step of the way is just against peace. It is a bulwark against peace.
Man, Prager University just put out a thing about Andrew Jackson being like the people's president.
What?
And, like I thought it was a joke, but I think at this point PragerU is just completely mask off, because they literally say, yo, Andrew Jackson owned slaves, hung people that disagreed with him, and made the Indians march on the other side of the Mississippi. And like I thought that like there was going to be some catch at the end, and they were like, nah, this dude ruled. I think they played like this this con for a while, and now they're like, dude, we've built the infrastructure. It's fine now. You can just say it. Like,
yeah, you could just say it. Anybody that disrespected his wife, that like, you know, kind of left her husband for him, yo, some dude said some shit about that shit. He shot him like in the face.
Maybe we'll watch that when we're done.
Okay.
With the slide.
All right.
Maybe we'll check that out, because it was pretty funny.
We need to send more men and equipment and supplies to General MacArthur. In view of the world situation, we need to build up our own Army, Navy, and Air Force over and above what is needed in Korea. We need to speed up our work with other countries in strengthening our common defenses. And we've worked out with other free countries
the
an
other
increased
countries
program for our common defense.
Free countries.
I shall recommend to the Congress that additional funds be provided for this purpose. This is of great importance. The free nations face a worldwide threat. It must be met with a worldwide defense. The United States and other free nations can multiply their strength by joining with one another in a common effort to provide this defense. This is our best hope for peace. We have the resources to meet our needs. Far more important, the American people are united in their belief in democratic freedom. We are united
even for
in
black
detesting
people?
Communist slavery. We know that the cost of freedom is high, but we are determined to preserve our freedom no matter what the cost. I know that our people are willing to do their part to support our soldiers and sailors and airmen who are fighting in Korea. I know that our fighting men can count on each and every one of you. Our country stands before the world as an example of how free men under God can build a community of neighbors working together for the good of all.
What?
That is
For
the
purpose
goal
of bombing
we
an
seek,
entire country to the
not
Stone
only
Age.
for ourselves, but for all people. We believe that freedom and peace are essential if men are to live as our Creator intended us to live.
Dude, like, here's the thing.
It is this faith that has guided us in the past, and it is this faith that will fortify us in the stern days ahead.
The end. So, dude, like, here's the thing, is that the 1950s especially are like the one period of time where it's just like, you have the rise of the suburbs. You have, like, the dissolution of, like, the community writ large within America, right? You have, like, just a heightened contradiction in terms of civil rights. It is, like, the one time where literally every neighbor around America fucking despises them, except for like Canada, because they're like our goofy cousin.
And for those that don't know, kind of this like hierarchy of events or whatever you want to refer to it, the United States, this kind of like declaration from Truman, not just this one specifically, but obviously the Truman Doctrine, and then continuing to the Korean War, is essentially like the beginning of like this idea that America has like a divine right to interfere in any corner of the world for like the nebulous concepts of freedom or democracy. This kind of began with the Monroe Doctrine, but the Monroe Doctrine kind of only referred to the Western Hemisphere, because this is in like the coming of like the post-colonial time where like all the European powers, it's like, none of these European powers can do anything on this side of the world. Like, this is wholly our influence, and nobody from Europe can come over here and say shit. These are our colonies now. So
Right.
Spain, get the hell out of here. Portugal, get the hell out of here. This is the United States territory now, essentially.
It's Canuckophobia, Ross.
Then, the Truman, there's also the Roosevelt Corollary, which is a part of that as well, but it's kind of more of a footnote than, its own doctrine. But then the Truman Doctrine, which is essentially the document that began the Cold War, pretty much says like, hey, this is a crazy time. There's communists all over the place. Freedom, democracy. United States is in a very unique position, and we need to make sure that we protect, freedom and democracy from those who seek to destroy it. So effectively, that means that we can use our military anywhere in the world for whatever purpose that we want. That is like our God-given right at this point.
Right. Not to mention, we're like one of the few countries without any real structural, damage. Yeah. So.
Well, and we might be getting a little off topic here, but it's a topic that I love talking about. The structural damage that was endured by Western Europe and other European nations, the usage of the Marshall Plan funds to take a bunch of that money that the United States was making off of being one of all the industrial output that it received from supplying the war in various
like in
ways,
Trenton, New Jersey.
Without any of the infrastructural damage. Now it had all this excess funds that it could essentially be like, oh, England, you're pretty fucked up. France, damn, what happened over here? Here, listen, I got some cool millions for you over here. Just remember who had your back. And it just kind of further solidified the United States, not really neo-colonial, but in a way neo-colonial control over not just like the third world, but like even like what is considered the first world.
And it's funny that you mentioned that, because it's literally the same exact thing we did in World War I, and the entire, in my opinion, and it's a little revisionist to come at it from that angle, but one of the main reasons that like we got into World War II is, if England and France falls, who's going to pay us back for the money from World War I?
Right.
So Shortly after the close of the Second World War, the Soviet Union and the United States occupied Korea in order to expel the defeated Japanese. A demarcation line between the Russian and American forces was set up along the 38th parallel. The creation of this line in no way had the explicit or implicit intention of establishing two separate countries. But the Cold War was soon to intrude. Both powers insisted that the unification of North and South was the principal and desired goal. However, they also desired to see this carried out in their own ideological image and settled thereby into a routine of proposal and counter-proposal, accusation and counter-accusation, generously intermixed with deviousness, and produced nothing in the way of an agreement during the ensuing years. Although both Moscow and Washington and their hand-picked Korean leaders were not always displeased about the division of the country, and on the grounds that half a country was better than none, officials and citizens of both sides continued to genuinely call for unification on a regular basis. So would you say that's wholly accurate?
No, I mean, I would probably, there's a couple things that I probably want to say about this. First things first is when they say, the Soviet Union and the United States occupied Korea in order to expel the defeated Japanese. While I agree with that, actually I'm probably nitpicking a little bit too much there, but that's fine. Both powers did insist that unification was the major priority here. Also, I think like 85% of Koreans also agreed that that was the priority when moving forward and forming a post-colonization government. However, they also desired to see this carried out in their own ideological image and settled thereby into a routine of pros. Okay, so the ideological image, at face value, this is true. Both would want that, but the fact of the matter is that Korea was already in the image of one far more than another, which is why the situations happened in South Korea with the many protests, and why the PRK had to be like legally disbanded because of its popularity. So it's true, but like I think there's some context there that needs to be mentioned. Let's see what else. The Moscow and Washington both had their hand-picked Korean leaders. I would agree with that. Now, I will also point out that Kim Il-sung was far more popular in Korea than Syngman Rhee. Syngman Rhee was like never really a very popular guy. Like I think even in like the United States or Korea, he just happened to be somebody that was like an anti-communist that was in the pocket of American statesmen, but Kim Il-sung was a warrior that fought in Manchuria against the Japanese. Now, what I have read is that there was other popular individuals in the northern part of Korea, and the Soviets were a little bit more partial to Kim Il-sung than other, popular leaders that were also like leftist and socialist or communist, like in communist parties, but Kim Il-sung was a desired individual by the Soviets from everything that I've read. But I would say in terms of overall popularity, if you're comparing him with Syngman Rhee, his popularity was far more legitimate and far more consolidated.
Right, because Syngman Rhee, I think like his only fans were what? Landlords, business owners, wealthy families.
Correct, and then like fascist, rightist groups that they indoctrinated.
Japanese collaborations.
Anything else on here? Always had this pleased division of the country, and none. Yeah. Okay, I'm done with that.
Okay.
That Korea was still one country with unification still the goal at the time of the war began was underscored by the chief U.S. delegate to the UN, Warren Austin, in a statement he made shortly afterwards. The artificial barrier, which has divided North and South Korea, has no basis for existence either in law or in reason. Neither in the United Nations or its Commission on Korea, nor the Republic of Korea, which is South Korea, recognize such a line. Now the North Koreans, by armed attack upon the Republic of Korea, have denied the reality of any such line. So this kind of just speaks to the general nature that you know, if you recall when we were here on Wednesday talking about the 38th parallel, this was essentially like a flick of the wrist type of thing, like that was like hastily organized by the U.S. Before the U.S. forces had even arrived in Korea. The Soviets were pretty much going very far south, way past the 38th parallel, until Truman or Dean Rusk, I forget who exactly it was, called over to old Uncle Joe. And said, "Hey man, 38th parallel, cool." And Joe was like, "All right, that's cool." And
whatever.
They actually retreated. They retreated back up north and left the south part of Korea for the Americans for when they landed. It was actually like a pretty diplomatic move by the Soviets because they already had their armed forces far further south than the 38th parallel. So yeah.
The two sides had been chasing across the parallel for several years, or clashing across the parallel. What happened on that fateful day in June could thus be regarded as no more than the escalation of an ongoing civil war. The North Korean government had claimed that in 1949 alone, the South Korean army or police perpetrated 2,617 armed incursions into the north to carry out murder, kidnapping, pillage, and arson for the purpose of causing social disorder and unrest, as well as to increase the combat capabilities of the invaders. At times, stated the Pyongyang government, thousands of soldiers were involved in a single battle with many casualties, resulting a State Department official, Ambassador at Large Philip C. Jessup, speaking in April 1950, put it this way. There is constant fighting between the South Korean army and bands that infiltrate the country from the north. There are very real battles involving perhaps 1,000 or 2,000 men. When you go to this boundary, as I did, you see troop movements, fortifications, and prisoners of war.
So I think this is just kind of speaking to the hot nature of the war along the 38th parallel that was going on well before, you know, that official like recognition of like, oh, look, the North Koreans, they crossed it, they're bad. There is not only like a wealth of evidence from the North Korean government, which, obviously we can look at the biases of that government and their incentive to maybe fabricate certain things, but also we have here State Department officials that are also speaking to that point, and also there's a number of historians that recognize this at this point. Also, none of this even fucking matters in my opinion, because when you already look at the horrors of Jeju and Yeosu and many other places in southern Korea, this is a very arbitrary distinction of the war at this point.
Right. Also, like, when
go pee real quick. Can you keep the ball up for a second?
Yeah. No. I mean, like, I was just gonna say that, like, would it be fair to consider that most of the people that are fighting on the South Korean side are Japanese collaborationists to begin with?
I don't know about most. You know what I mean? Because like, I think there's a couple things going on here. I think there is obviously Japanese collaborators are. There's wealthy businessmen, there's landowners, and there's Japanese collaborators. All three of these individuals have a lot to lose by either a PRK or a DPRK government. There are refugees coming from North Korea that weren't happy about how things were happening. There's also, I'm sure, tons of people that just like fell prey to propaganda of like, you know, you wake up and you see that there's a bunch of posters that say that these commies are going to come and they're going to ruin your life and they're going to take your women and they're going to do all these things. And then there's youth groups which are, you know, being, you know, taught certain things. So
or you're just probably like
desperate
for
organic
a buck.
Support for it as well. I don't think that we could say that it's like all of it,
right?
You know, just collaborators, but that was definitely a, you know, obviously, you know, reading about the history of this, it was significant contingent.
Do you want me to go to the next slide? Let you go to the
just pee real quick. I'll be like literally 15 seconds.
All right.
Not literally.
All right. I mean, like, I think like an important element is probably also, if you were here for the episode that we did on Wednesday, you would also know that, like, you know, the entire South Korean economy, at least, is practically in free fall, where, you know, you have mismanagement of their agriculture. You have people reinstating a lot of the, how would you phrase it? Like, what is it where, like, you tax the people basically to death? Shit, the word's escaping me. Something with an A. Austerity, that's it. You had like a lot of like the austerity measures that like, you know, were put in place by the Japanese when they were basically colonizing Korea, right? And when the U.S. arrived, they pretty much reinstated a lot of those people that were in charge during that period of time, right? And they went back to, you know, the very high tax on rice, right? So you had the agricultural center of the peninsula, right, being unable to feed its people because not because they weren't able to produce enough, but because there was so much being exported that not enough was being left behind for the actual people making it to even eat, right? So I think that, like, you know, during this climactic economic upheaval in the southern portion of the peninsula, you would probably find some people that like maybe ideologically don't agree with a lot of the people in power in the South, but out of sheer desperation will do anything to feed themselves and their loved ones.
Do you want to read something interesting that I just sent you while you're talking about kind of agriculture? You were talking about agricultural mismanagement in the South.
Yeah, like what we were talking about on Wednesday.
Yeah, absolutely. But some of the things that started the revolt in Yosu and I forget the other place starts with an S. But did you see what I sent you?
Pulling it up right now. The National Corps incident was a death march that occurred in the winter of 1951 during the Korean War. On the 11th of December, 1950, the South...
Have I read things like, oh, this is a death march? Like, you know that first, like, sentence in Wikipedia kind of gives you, like, the general classification of something?
Yeah.
It's like, this is a death march.
Oh, this was a death march. There's
one of those. Okay.
There's nothing good about this. On the 11th of December 1950, South Korea issued an act establishing the National Defense Corps. South Korean citizen aged 17 to 40, excluding military, police, and government officials, were drafted into the National Defense Corps. The Syngman Rhee government adopted officers from Great Korean Young Adults Association, which was a pro-Rhee Syngman group, into the Corps. Immediately, 406,000 drafted citizens were deployed in 49 training units. When National Defense Corps soldiers were ordered to march southward on the Korean peninsula under the Chinese offensive, however, funds for food purchases were embezzled by the National Defense Commander, Kim Young-gun, also spelled Kim Yoon-kun or Kim Young-gun. Son-in-law of Defense Minister Shin Sung-mo, approximately 300,000 men were lost to death or desertion during the 3-week, 300-mile death march. By June 1951, when an investigating committee made known its findings, it was reported that some 50,000 to 90,000 soldiers starved to death or died of disease on the march and in the training camps. Dude, wait, this thing started...
Because of embezzlement. Because of food embezzlement.
This thing started in 1950, right? And we're talking by June 1951. So basically, what? 6 months. 6 months. 50 to 90,000 soldiers, which, by the way, is a large margin of error.
Yeah, and it's like one of those things where they're like, it's one of those things where it's like, famines are very, very routinely talked about, when criticizing, obviously the person that remember that meme that started this whole thing, that like South good, North bad thing.
Yes.
I don't think they talk about the type of like rampant corruption or maybe something that's endemic in certain type of capitalist individual accumulation mindsets that would lead to such a horrific, distribution policy that led to so many deaths. And also this very concretely validates many of the accusations that we read earlier of mismanagement by Syngman Rhee army officials and police officers in terms of grain requisition and distribution.
Well, let's just say I'm trying to get like a number here of how many days that is exactly. So that's December, right? 11th, right, is when it started, right? To June, right? 1951.
Mm-hmm.
I'm really bad at math. Don't laugh at me, chat. Right?
First, just find out how many full years it was, and then do that times that.
It's not even years. It's not even a full year.
Oh,
it's just
how many full months was it?
It's 197 days. Okay. So that means, right? If I open up my calculator here, right? Let's just go with the conservative estimate of 50,000 people, right? Divided by 197 days. That's 253.8 fucking people a day dying.
Mm-hmm. You go down real quick. Did you see this last part here, the second to last paragraph?
On April 30th, 1951, the National Assembly of South Korea adopted a resolution on disbandment of the National Defense Corps. The National Assembly investigation showed that the commanding officers embezzled 1 billion won and tens of millions of won was misappropriated to President Syngman Rhee's political fund. That's fucking disgusting.
Yeah. So, you can see that this money that, the money from the embezzlement is going pretty much directly into Syngman Rhee's funds here, into the coffers of Syngman Rhee.
And here's the commanding officers,
Yeah, they executed those guys.
Kind of getting what they sort of deserve. So what is the max is 90,000, right? Divided by 197. Well, that's 456.8 people a day. That's ridiculous.
In a very small country too. I think South Korea only had like 7 million people living in it as well. So yeah, I mean that's pretty significant.
But no matter what, like the size of the population, the fact is like.
It always kind of matters the size of the population because like you have like something like China, like when it had the Great Leap Forward, or you had something like Soviet Union when it had the, the famine in the 1930s.
Right.
And we're not talking about a nation of 7 million people. You know what I mean? We're talking about hundreds of millions of people, if not, I don't think China had 1 billion people yet at that point, but hundreds of millions of people.
Right.
It changes it a little bit just in terms of severity.
Just a little bit, but still. 300 to close to 500 people dying a day. It's a lot of people a day.
Yeah.
So, I think... Yeah, this is you, bud.
Okay. Seen in this context, the question of who fired the first shot on 25 June 1950 takes on a much reduced air of significance. As it is, the North Korean version of events is that their invasion was provoked by 2 days of bombardment by the South Koreans on the 23rd and 24th, followed by a surprise South Korean attack across the border on the 25th against the western town of Haeju and other places. Announcement of the southern attack was broadcast over the North's radio later in the morning of the 25th. Contrary to general belief at the time, no United Nations group, neither the UN Military Observer Group in the field nor the UN Commission on Korea and Seoul, witnessed or claimed to have witnessed the outbreak of hostilities. The Observer Group's field trip along the parallel ended on June 23rd. Its statements about what took place afterwards are either speculation or based on information received from the South Korean government or the U.S. military, notoriously
reliable, trustworthy, honest, truthful.
So yeah, this kind of speaks a little bit to what I was saying there about once you take into all the consideration of everything that happened in the 5 years prior to the official declaration of the Korean War, this whole who decided to step on snake line type of situation is really arbitrary and insignificant to the greater picture. But also, I think it was South Korea also. Even if we're looking at that situation, I think that it was also a South Korean fucking act of aggression.
It looks a lot different than what I remember it looking like.
This is Movie Tone.
Oh.
Lionel Gamlin reporting.
Yes, he's doing the accent. He's doing the accent, chat.
Following the Chinese nationalist expulsion from China, the threat to Formosa, the long drawn-out battles in Malaya and Indochina, communist attacks, in fact, throughout Southeast Asia, there comes open aggression in Korea. Here, the Russian-dominated North Koreans launched a full-scale, well-prepared drive on the capital of the South, Seoul. The peaceful southern democracy was taken by surprise by this communist blitzkrieg, culmination of red aims in the Far East that are perfectly clear for all to see. It is tragic indeed that war should strike the South Korean people so recently recovered from Japanese occupation and ill treatment. In 1948, they had held their first elections under the United Nations, and they were beginning to settle down in spite of the threat from the North. Soon afterwards, a visit by General MacArthur was warmly welcomed by President Syngman Rhee and the people. Now it's from MacArthur's command that the first help has come. South Korea's minister in London, Mr. Chi Chang-yun, seen with his family at the legation, made this early comment.
It is no local civil war, but it concerns with all the free-loving countries of the world. If it goes on without checked by the people of the world, it will endanger all the free nations in larger scale.
Since that interview, the peoples of the free world, acting under the United Nations, have given their answer, and the United States, in a swift, bold decision, has already gone into action. Air power first, with cover and support for South Korea. And sea power, with the 7th Fleet ordered to protect Formosa, together with reinforcements for the Philippines and more aid to French Indochina. Throughout the free world, these moves to halt the Reds are welcomed, whatever the consequences.
Kind of like have like a historical narrative and like see what the you know the situation is, you know, at least from, you know, what's being fed to Americans at that point.
Because nowadays you got to watch an entire movie to get the propaganda. I mean, like back then it was kind of like a short clip, you know, you could just watch real quick, under 2 minutes. Yeah. Not like today. Moreover, early in the morning of the 20th... Oh, you know what? I always forget to turn this back on. Moreover, early in the morning of the 26th, the South Korean Office of Public Information announced that Southern forces had indeed captured the North Korean town of Haeju. The announcement stated that the attack had occurred that same morning, but an American military status report as of nightfall on the 25th notes that all southern territory west of the Imjin River had been lost to a depth of at least 3 miles inside the border, except in the area of the Haeju counterattack. Thank you, I love you. Subsequently, the South Korean government denied that its capture of Haeju had actually taken place, blaming the original announcement apparently on an exaggerating military officer. One historian has ascribed the allegedly incorrect announcement to an quote, an error due to poor communications, plus an attempt to stiffen South Korean resistance by claiming a victory. Whatever actually lay behind the announcement, it is evident that very little reliance, if any, can be placed upon the statements made by the South Korean government concerning the start of the war.
Sorry, I'm working on ordering some food here.
My mind literally just got here.
What'd you say?
My mind literally just got here.
Yeah, so, you know, there's this Haeju situation where, you know, everything's up in the air. The North Korean says that it's, that the, you know, the South Korean started it and then vice versa. But here we have, like, you know,
it's a passion.
I guess a South Korean radio said that they did it, and then everybody's kind of playing catch up, like, no, wait, that was wrong. Like, don't worry about that. Like, I swear that didn't actually happen. Please.
All right, as entertaining as it might be to try and watch me eat while walking on this fucking thing, I have to get off this fucking thing.
All right. There were, in fact, reports in the. Let me finish this. There were, in fact, reports in the Western press of the attack on Haeju, which made no mention of the South Korean government's announcement, and which appear to be independent confirmations of the event. The London Daily Herald, in its issue of 26 June, stated that American military observers said that the Southern forces had made a successful relieving counterattack near the West Coast, penetrated 5 miles into Northern Territory, and seized the town of Haeju. This was echoed in the Guardian of London the same day. American officials confirmed that the Southern troops had captured Haeju. Similarly, the New York Herald Tribune reported also on the 26th that South Korean troops drove across the 38th parallel, which forms the frontier, to capture the manufacturing town of Haeju just north of the line. The Republican troops captured quantities of equipment. None of the accounts specified just when this attack took place.
On the 25th, American writer John Gunther was in Japan preparing his biography of General Douglas MacArthur. As he recounts in the book, he was playing tourist in the town of Nikko with 2 important members of the American occupation when one of these was called unexpectedly to the telephone. He came back and whispered, "A big story has just broken. The South Koreans have attacked North Korea that evening." Gunther and his party returned to Tokyo, where several officers met us at the station to tell us correctly and with much amplification what had happened. There was no doubt whatever that North Korea was the aggressor. And the telephone call, Gunther explains, the message may have been garbled in transmission. Nobody knew anything much at headquarters the first few hours, and probably people were taken in by blatant corrosive lies of the North Korean radio. There is something a little incongruous about the picture of American military and diplomatic personnel, practicing anti-communists, each one being taken in on so important a matter by communist lies, blatant ones no less.
So now we see this guy, Gunther, right, who, had this story and then pretty much switches it up real quick, I guess, after talking with other Americans, and then was like, that message may have been garbled in transmission. Nobody actually knows what's going on. Disregard everything I said before.
The head of South Korea, Syngman Rhee, had often expressed his desire and readiness to compel the unification of Korea by force. On the 26th of June, the New York Times reminded its readers that on a number of occasions, Dr. Rhee has indicated that his army would have taken the offensive if Washington had given the consent. The newspaper noted that before the war began, the warlike talk strangely had almost all come from South Korean leaders. Rhee may have had good reason for provoking a full-scale war apart from the issue of unification. On the 30th of May, elections for the National Assembly were held in the South, in which Rhee's party suffered a heavy setback and lost control of the assembly. Like countless statesmen before and after him, Rhee may have decided to play the war card to rally support for his shaky rule. A labor advisor attached to the American aid mission to South Korea, Stanley Earle, resigned in July, expressing the opinion that the South Korean government was an oppressive regime, which did very little to help the people, and that an internal South Korean rebellion against the Rhee government would have occurred if the forces of North Korea had not invaded. So what
already was occurring, actually, but go ahead. What were you saying?
I was just gonna say, are the North Koreans really that bad if they're just helping democracy?
Yeah, exactly. Which is the excuse that we have for bombing half of a country, 85% of structures, killing 3 million people. But if we can use democracy for that, why can't the North Korean forces coming in actually liberating a southern part of the country from military occupation by a foreign actor?
Have you ever heard the phrase, you can't make an omelet without, committing a few war crimes?
Yeah. So and then also there's some other stuff here. Syngman Rhee was always pretty adamant about taking this very hardline approach he was trying to goad the United States into war or like backing him up in a war against the North. This is nothing new out of the rhetoric of him. Also, in terms of his like election viability, there was UN people in the UN being like, "Oh, we shouldn't split this into two countries." Here we have who was it here? Stanley Earle, pretty much saying like this is an oppressive regime, and that there would be an internal South Korean rebellion against his government if North Korea hadn't invaded. I think that's a little bit inaccurate because I think it had already been happening. If we look at Jeju and Yeosu and everything that was happening pretty much all throughout South Korea at that time, there was already an anti-Ri rebellion going on. That was part of the main reason why the Korean War happened. Well, that's the entire reason the Korean War happened. The war, and a brutal one it was indeed, was fought ostensibly in defense of the Syngman Rhee regime. Outside of books published by various South Korean governments, it is rather difficult to find a kind word for the man the United States brought back to Korea in 1945 after decades of exile in America during the Japanese occupation of his country. Flown into Korea in one of MacArthur's airplanes, Rhee was soon maneuvered into a position of prominence and authority by the U.S. Army military government in Korea, USAMGIK. In the process, American officials had to suppress a provisional government, the KPR, also known as the PRK, depending on which acronym is being used. That was the outgrowth of a number of regional governing committees set up by the prominent Koreans, which had already begun to carry out administrative tasks, such as food distribution and keeping order. The KPR's offer of its services to the arriving Americans was dismissed out of hand. So, a couple of things here about that. If you were here with us on Wednesday, we already talked about this in pretty significant detail. The PRK was an autonomous Korean government that was organized grassroots without any kind of coercion from the Soviets or the Americans, just a Korea-wide organization of people's committees, labor unions, taking up government functions, running factories, distributing food, seizing land from collaborators, redistributing it, helping Korea turn into like a functional and progressive state. The United States, it says it was dismissed as out of hand. To go a little bit deeper into that, it was outlawed. It was immediately outlawed. Its ruler, its leaders were imprisoned. The people's committees were disbanded, and then eventually the labor unions were also disbanded.
And they wasted no time in even getting the people's committees together, right? They pretty much happened almost overnight.
And they were operating in all but 7 of the counties in all of Korea. So you have the entirety of Korea. I think it's like 120 something counties. All but 7 had functioning people's committees with support of the people.
Despite its communist-sounding name, the KPR included a number of conservatives. Indeed, Rhee himself had been given the leading position of chairman. Rhee and the other conservatives, most of whom were still abroad when chosen, perhaps did not welcome the honor because the KPR, on balance, was probably too leftist for their taste. As it was for the higher echelons of the U.S. magic. But after 35 years under the Japanese, any group or government set up to undo the effects of colonialism had to have a revolutionary tinge to it. It was the conservatives in Korea who had collaborated with the Japanese, leftists and other nationalists who had struggled against them. The makeup of the KPR necessarily reflected this, and it was reportedly more popular than any other political grouping. Whatever the political leanings or intentions of the KPR, by denying it any authority, status, or form, the U.S. magic, which is what I'm going to refer to it as, was regulating Korean political life as if the country were a defeated enemy and not a friendly state liberated from a common foe and with a right to independence and self-determination.
That part can't be repeated enough when we're talking about this, because I think we might lose track of that through all the rhetoric that surrounds the war, especially from the United States side, that this was some kind of a belligerent in a war. This is an enemy. This is someone that we need to be. No, this was someone that was colonized by our enemies. We were in a unified agreement to liberate this place. Even Kim Il-sung was supplying information to United States Air Force officials for to use against the Japanese and things like that. Same thing with Ho Chi Minh. The Soviets, the Kim Il Sung, and the Americans were all working together ostensibly to defeat the Japanese. The United States is the major turncoat in this whole equation, though, who immediately was like, "Oh no, collaborators, you're cool. You guys get the fuck out of here. No, none of this redistribution. Chill with all that. Okay, we're gonna kill you. How about this?"
Right. I mean, I feel like
I know that sounds reductive, but like
I feel like for the Chinese, the Vietnamese, and all the people that like literally assisted the U.S. and like saved American lives, right, countless fucking times, right, not just assisting, but also like straight up saving lives of Americans. It's got to be like a spit in the face for all the people that they lost, right, trying to save those American lives throughout World War II in the Pacific Theater.
Yep, absolutely.
Is this you or me?
I think this is me.
All right.
The significance of shunting aside the KPR went beyond this. John Gunther, who was the journalist we spoke about prior, hardly a radical, summed up the situation like this. So the first and best chance for building united Korea was tossed away. That's the PRK/KPR. And Alfred Crofts, a member of the American military government at the time, has written that a potential unifying agency became thus one of the 54 splinter groups in South Korean political life. Syngman Rhee would be Washington's man. Eminently pro-American, strongly anti-communist, sufficiently controllable, his regime was one in which landlords, collaborators, the wealthy, and other conservative elements readily found a home. Crofts has pointed out that before the American landings, a political right associated in popular thought with colonial rule could not exist. But shortly afterwards, we were to foster at least 3 conservative factions. So this speaks to, again, the lack of popularity for the Syngman Rhee and the policies that they were trying to push. This journalist is recognizing that the best chance for building a united Korea was the PRK. And the United States essentially just splintered it and factioned it and caused a bunch of issues and sided with a regime of landlords, collaborators, and the wealthy.
Man, like, this dude had been away from Korea for 30 fucking years. Now, for you and me, that's like most of our lives.
Like entire life, yeah.
Yeah. Now, think about something like this. Like, when you first started playing Magic the Gathering, did you play like in a comic book shop or anything? Did you ever go to like a meet or anything like that?
Okay. Let me see here. So when I was a kid, we would go to this place, Legends, to buy the cards, but I never played there. And when I really started playing, yes, I was going to a shop to play.
But you were like
as an adult.
You were like a regular though, right?
I was in the shop a lot for sure.
Right.
I was in the shop a lot from Pokemon. It was like really close to my house at the mall. We were down at the mall and we would go there for Pokemon cards and then eventually Magic cards. Yeah.
How many years ago was that?
That must have been like 23 years ago now.
23 years ago? Right. All right.
Yeah.
So now imagine, right, like trying to go back there and acting as if like you never left. And that like, you're just a regular there, right? And you should run this place.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
It's just as ridiculous in my opinion.
Yeah. You should run this place. You still have some of those old cards right here. Get in here. You gotta run this. Yeah, no, that's a hilarious analogy.
Committed to
also,
what?
I wanted to bring up one thing that I forgot to bring up. Do you remember like 3 slides ago when it said that even though the PRK sounded very socialist or communist in name, it was actually it was kind of like it was willing to bring together all sides. And one thing that I think I've neglected to mention is that both sides is that this PRK situation was actively electing both Syngman Rhee and Kim Il Sung into its like kind of like group of like committee of leaders. Like it was willing to be like, there's this Syngman Rhee guy, there's this Kim Il Sung, and there was other people too. It was not just like this one like head of it, but like it recognized like, okay, Syngman Rhee's kind of somebody here, Kim Il Sung somebody here. Let's have them both be a part of this.
So basically, it was trying to put together like a parliament.
Yeah, exactly.
Where
to represent multiple interests.
Right.
But the thing is that the majority of the Korean people wanted land redistribution, nationalization of certain industries, certain rights, punishment for collaborators.
Right.
Landlords were going to take a big step back. Things that the conservative elements and the United States weren't willing to deal with.
Right. Because I think as soon as the U.S. hears, like, land redistribution, what? Communism? Committed to establishing free enterprise, the U.S. Magic sold off vast amounts of confiscated Japanese property, homes, businesses, industrial raw materials, and other valuables. Those who could most afford to purchase these assets were collaborators who had grown rich under the Japanese and other profiteers. Quote, with half the wealth of the nation up for grabs, demoralization was rapid. While the Russians did a thorough house cleaning of Koreans in the north who had collaborated with the Japanese, the American military government in the south allowed many collaborators, and at first even the Japanese themselves, to retain positions of administration and authority, much to the consternation of those Koreans who had fought against the Japanese occupation of their country. And it literally is even more than occupation, but I'll wait till the next sentence. To some extent, these people may have been retained in office because they were the most experienced at keeping the country running. God, that's a loose fucking term. Another reason has been suggested: to prevent the Korean People's Republic from assuming a measure of power. Now that sounds more accurate.
Yes.
Because,
of course,
like, they were colonized.
Well, that's what they said. Do you remember what they said about? Do you remember what somebody said about? There was a quote that was included in my presentation about, some people are just born police.
Right.
And, those Japanese are damn good police as far as we can tell. So, we'd be stupid not to use them.
They're just so damn good at oppressing and just marginalizing these people. It just comes natural to them.
Exactly. And then also, I think it's important here, this situation here too, that this kind of shock therapy that we covered that happened at the Soviet Union, or the ex-Soviet Union after it had dissolved, that the same thing, when they came in there, it's the United States came in there being okay, free markets ready, here's all the shit, who wants to buy it? And it's the people that are already abused the population enough to garnish wealth to just buy land that people that had grown rich collaborating with the Japanese. So with half the wealth of the nation up for grabs, demoralization was rapid. The people were not happy about this.
Right. And these are people that had already had their culture banned, their women and daughters just kidnapped and
sold into sex slavery
across half the goddamn globe. You name it, whatever horrible thing you could imagine has been done to them, and now you're just gonna
you just read about Unit 731, and I'm somebody that gets a little bit TOS sketchy with a lot of the things that I talk about, or maybe some of the more brutal parts of history that we go over.
Right.
But I think even Unit 731, you have to really be very delicate about how you talk about it, because it is that grotesque, the things that were happening there. Unimaginable things. If you asked me to write a horror movie, I would not have been able to write something fictional that is worse than what Unit 731 was doing. Well, unless I use them as inspiration.
People always love bringing up Mengele,
Yeah.
That guy that famously was, had justice delivered unto him, right?
Famously.
People always like to bring up Mengele, and it's just imagine
Did Soviets get to him?
What?
Did Soviets get to him, or was he at Nuremberg?
Dog.
What?
Hang on. Making me fucking do this. First of all, I want you to just guess based off of what the year of death.
Oh, he died in 1979.
All right. Yeah. So you know about him, right? I don't need to explain what he did. All right. Good.
He's essentially Unit 731 of Germany.
Exactly.
The Siamese twins and all that stuff. Yeah. Oh, he went to Buenos Aires.
Yeah.
I heard it's nice there.
He suffered a stroke in 1976, experienced high blood pressure, and developed an ear infection, which affected his balance on February 7th, 1979, while visiting his friends Wolfram in l'Isolat Bosset in the coastal resort of Bertioga. Mengele suffered another stroke while swimming and drowned. His body was buried in Embu das Artes under the name Wolfgang Gerhard, whose identification Mengele had been using since 1971. Other aliases used by Mengele in his life, blah, 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 blah. So, yeah, no, he,
Famously,
justice had been doled out to him by God, I guess, you know.
It's one of those ones that's like, you know, I'm not somebody who's ever really, like, very enthused about, God, what is the Israeli intelligence service?
Mossad.
Mossad.
It's like the one thing that I'll give him.
Particularly enthused about Mossad, but if I heard about them rolling into Buenos Aires and throwing a bag over this fucking guy's head and bringing him to fucking Israel to do whatever they really want with him, honestly, I don't really care at that point. I couldn't say that I wouldn't crack a smile. Because they had engaged in some of that, right? Isn't that something that Mossad did? They would like covertly go into South America and grip up some Nazis and bring them to justice.
I want to say yes, but there's this fear in the back of my mind where it's just like, or are they just gonna like request their services to be used upon the Palestinian people?
Palestinians, yeah. Right. All right, let's move forward here a little steppy step. And while the North soon implemented widespread and effective land reform and at least formal equality for women, the Rhee regime remained hostile to these ideals. 2 years later, it enacted a land reform measure, but this applied only to former Japanese property. A 1949 law to covet the other holdings was not enforced at all, and the abuse of land tenants continued in both old and new forms. Public resentment against the U.S. re-administration was aroused because of these policies, as well as because of the suppression of the KPR in some very questionable elections. So reluctant was Rhee to allow an honest election. That by early 1950 had become enough of an embarrassment to the United States for Washington officials to threaten to cut off aid if he failed to do so, and also improve the state of civil liberties. Apparently, because of this pressure, the elections on May 30th were fair enough to allow moderate elements to participate. And as mentioned earlier, the Rhee government was decisively repudiated. So he doesn't even win this election either. Like I said, he is an extremely unpopular leader. There is unrest and repression going on just unanimously or ubiquitously throughout the southern part of Korea. And it lays out here. We went over this on Wednesday. The reasons for this, you know, they had the PRK that's disbanded. People aren't happy. The way that they're dealing with rice distribution, the way that they're still working with collaborators, the way that they're working with wealthy businessmen and landlords who are probably also collaborators, has scorned the Korean population pretty much top to bottom. Aside from like a wealthy conservative few and their like fascist youth groups that they indoctrinate, they pretty much have no formal base of, no strong base of support whatsoever.
I mean, shit, at least Juan Guaido was like from Venezuela and had lived there in the last 30 years. But this guy, it's just like, you're trying to run him. Basically, you could have grabbed any guy of like partial Korean descent and just been like, oh yeah, you're going to be the president now.
Yeah.
God damn it. Wait, did I skip one? No, right? Whew. Sorry, very spicy salmon.
Dude, I'm so hungry.
I'm sorry. The resentment was manifested in the form of frequent rebellions, including some guerrilla warfare in the hills from 1946 to the beginning of the war, and even during the war. The rebellions were dismissed by the government as communist-inspired and repressed accordingly. But as John Gunther observed, I'm sorry, all I can think of is the fucking penguin from Adventure Time, whenever his name comes up. It can be safely said that in the eyes of Hodge, the commander of U.S. forces in Korea, and Rhee, particularly at the beginning, almost any Korean not an extreme rightist was a communist and potential traitor. General Hodge evidently permitted U.S. troops to take part in the repression. Mark Gain, a correspondent in Korea for the Chicago Sun, wrote that American soldiers fired on crowds, conducted mass arrests, combed the hills for suspects, and organized posses of Korean rightists, constabulary and police for mass raids. Gain related that one of Hodge's political advisors assured him, Gain, that Rhee was not a fascist. He is 2 centuries before fascism, a pure Bourbon.
Do you know what that term means? Like, I think in my mind, I understood what it meant, like, in that it's like even a kind of antiquated form of fascism, like almost that it's like he's like a royal, like a monarchist of some kind. Well, I would say pure bourbon. It's gonna.
We can get to the bottom of this. We can get to the bottom of this.
Anybody in chat? Yeah, there you go. Look, right there, House of Bourbon. Just go to that.
European.
Go back. Hit
Fine.
back. Hit back.
You want this? You want this?
Yeah. This is probably what it's referring to, right?
Is it though?
What else would a bourbon be?
I don't know. An alcoholic
he's
beverage.
About, like, he's like has like this royal, like, monarchist mindset that, like, he's like even a step like deeper than fascism. Look, it said right there, the French Revolution. Go up.
Where?
Up. Okay, stop. The Prince of Condé was a cadet branch of the Bourbons, descended from Henry IV, and the Prince of Conti was a cadet line of the Condé branch. Both houses recognized as the Princes of the Blood were prominent French noble families, well known for their participation in French affairs even during exile in the French Revolution, until their respective extinctions in 1830 and 1814. So I just think that they're probably referring to it in this sense, I'd have to say.
Possibly. I just want to see if there's any kind of thing talking about popular culture or anything like that. Bourbons of Italy. Dynasties of Bourbon, Second House of Bourbon, Third Bourbon, Fourth Bourbon, Fifth Bourbon. Bourbon.
Bourbon chicken. It's like a monarch, yeah.
All right, so he's like a monarchist, I guess. I don't know. Normally, like, there's like a section
One of
in
the last
these...
houses of the Spanish monarchy too. So says Muro.
Well, I did see that on there. Apparently, they were fucking everywhere. Kind of like the Habsburgses.
The Habsburgses.
Yeah, but they inbred so hard that, like, you know, their kids wound up sterile.
Yeah. Okay, no, you're right. I'm sorry.
Oh, you're good.
Describing the government's anti-guerrilla campaign in 1948, a pro-Western political scientist, John K. Chang, O. of Marquette University, has written, in these campaigns, the civil liberties of countless persons were often ignored. Frequently, hapless villagers suspected of aiding the guerrillas, were summarily executed. A year later, when a committee on the National Assembly launched an investigation of collaborators, Rhee had his police raid the assembly. 22 people were arrested, of whom 16 were later to have found suffered either broken ribs, skull injuries, or broken eardrums. At the time of the outbreak of war in June 1950, there was an estimated 14,000 political prisoners in South Korean jails. If anybody was listening before, the Korean population, prison population, actually increased under American occupation than it was under Japanese colonial rule. And if you know anything about Japanese colonization of China or Korea or Manchuria, it's probably some of the most disgusting thing that's happened in the 20th century. So for the United States to come in and actually make like food distribution worse and prison populations go up, really talk about like the benevolent occupation that the Americans were engaging in there. Okay, there you go. Also, yeah, I think that I made my point there.
Just want to show people one quick thing.
Okay, show the people.
One quick fucking thing. Do. Do you know who this is?
No.
No idea?
No.
No guesses?
You don't make me guess like an ethnic person. Like you're.
Come on. Come on.
If I'm wrong, I just sound racist. I don't know who this is.
You could be.
Racist. Who is it?
It's Shinzo Abe.
Okay.
This dude had zero fucking shame, right?
Yeah,
About
I know,
Unit
I've heard of
731.
him. Yeah, he just got murked recently, right?
Yes, he got what the fucking Borderlands got. So, like, you know, that there are not just him, there are many people still within the Japanese government who have no issues, no qualms, no problems with Unit 731 and what they did.
Do you remember this? When we brought this up before,
send me the link.
oh my God, please stop torturing me. My brain's just not working at all. Here, look, do you remember when we were talking about this?
I am awaiting the link.
The link has arrived.
Oh, is this? Yeah. This is what, Shinzo's like grandpappy or something?
Something like that, yeah. Here's another thing. With Prescott Bush, who is someone who had his assets frozen due to doing business with Nazis during World War II, also the grandfather of George Bush, or great-grandfather of George W. Bush, and Eisenhower. Go down.
How far
Go
down?
down, it's all right.
How far down?
There. President Eisenhower, Kishi. You see it?
Yeah. I remember this.
Okay, yeah. So this is yeah, and possibly connected with the business plot also. Thank you.
I'm
the
like
similarity.
pretty certain he is connected with the business plot.
Yeah. So this guy here, here, let's just bring him up. What's his full name? Kishi, Prime Minister Kishi.
Uh-huh.
Ah, here it is.
But also remember,
Here,
we
you
went
want-
through this last time where he's got like 2 different names.
2 different names. Yes. Here, bring this up real quick. Also, not only that, I forgot to mention this last time, but did you know that multiple members of Unit 731 lived in the United States afterwards and just worked on worked in just don't worry about this one.
All right. I'm sorry.
Look at this next one that I sent you. Work in like pharmaceutical subsidiaries of like big pharmaceutical companies and shit like that until
No,
they died.
I did not know about that. Which pharmaceutical companies was it?
Let me see if I can find it. Pull up the other thing that I just sent while I
right.
look it up, please.
Because you know what New Jersey is famous for, right? The monster of the Showa era.
Mm-hmm. And this guy became, what did he say after? He became Prime Minister of Japan in 1957.
Right.
You know that country we were at war with? Remember Pearl Harbor? Do you remember any of that stuff, John?
Yeah. They make a movie about it like every 10 years.
Yeah.
Yeah, that shit. Yeah.
It's a day that would live in infamy, remember?
Yeah, something like that, right? November something, 1940 something.
Yeah.
In the Manchurian Incident?
Just an incident.
It turned into a puppet state called Manchukuo. Although nominally ruled by Puyi, who had been the last emperor of Qing Dynasty, Manchukuo was a de facto for Japanese colony. Of all the Chinese Manchus, but deputy ministers were Japanese. These were all men who really ruled Manchukuo from the start of the Japanese army. So Manchukuo supports the Japanese Empire. Blah 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 blah. 1941, I'm being told.
Is what? What happened in 1941?
When the Pearl Harbor happened. Zaibatsu. Thought that was just like a big sword from Rurouni Kenshin.
December 7th, right?
The Manchurian
whoopsie days. I don't know. Let's just move forward here because I have to find it.
I know.
Book I have. I'm not going to be able to find it right now.
It's triggering something in your brain, and I get it.
Oh, I swear it's true.
I know.
I swear I've actually gone down a Wikipedia rabbit hole. Maybe when we finish the slides, I'll run down and I'll try to pull up the information.
I wonder how many of them lived in New Jersey though, because New Jersey is known for like its pharmaceutical companies. Right. So, even during the height of the war, in February 1951, reported Professor O, there was the Kochang incident, again involving suspicion of aiding guerrillas.
Another one of those whoopsie daisies.
What?
Another infamous whoopsie daisy. The Kochang incident. Whoopsie.
Kochang whoopsie daisy, again involving suspicion of aiding guerrillas, in which about 600 men and women, young and old, were herded into a narrow valley and mowed down with machine guns by a South Korean army unit. Fuck. There was, for example, the consensus that the brutality of the war in Korea must be laid overwhelmingly at the doorstep of the North Koreans. The Kochang incident mentioned above may be relevant to providing some counterbalance to this belief. Referring to the incident, the British Korea scholar John Halliday observed, "This account not only serves to indicate the level of political violence employed by the UN side, but also confers inherent plausibility on DPRK and Southern opposition accusations of atrocities and mass executions by the UN forces and re-officials during the occupation of the DPRK in late 1950. After all, if civilians could be mowed down in the South on suspicion of aiding, not even being, guerrillas, what about the North, where millions could reasonably be assumed to be communists or political militants?" So I think, if I'm not mistaken correctly, and please don't get mad, but during the Blowback episode where they discussed this, right?
What the fuck?
That like it was literally just that they didn't want to continue walking with them anymore, and they just didn't want to deal with them anymore, and they just literally murdered them because it was more expedient to do.
Are you talking about the People's Army, or are you talking about the South Korean forces?
The South Korean forces, or the UN forces, rather.
To be fair, I think everyone was doing this. I think that like there was a lot of like political persecution going on in the South, but also the North. We're going to get into it in a second, where there was tons of POWs that died in the North too. But a report showed that it was mostly due to just like when you're in the middle of a warfare and you take a POW, sometimes it's like, okay, my entire country's being bombed right now. Wolves are at the door. I can't really walk this American dickhead back to this like safe place to keep him for a while. We're just gonna have to put one in him and let leave it where it is. Wait. No, unable to play video. All right, here, real quick, can you just pull this up real quick, the Wikipedia thing I just sent you? This is the whole thing on the Wikipedia, but I just want to show you something interesting. At least something that I found interesting, and I'll send you the video that this is supposed to be.
Okay. So which thing am I pulling up again?
The Korean War, it's just the, okay, go down to the war crimes. What does it say? Hold on, let me see. War crimes, yeah, go to war crimes. You can just Control F war crimes if you want. Okay. See all these war crimes that are led there?
Yeah.
So go and look at each one of them and see who perpetuated them.
War crime against communists and alleged sympathizers.
This is a DPRK one, so we can take this. We'll take this one. This was a massacre of 7,900 nurses, inpatient civilians, wounded soldiers by the Korean People's Army. I haven't looked into anything like that, but I don't. Armies are fucked up. People do fucked up things. The DPRK isn't like some kind of like comic book hero that never did anything wrong. But go forward to the next one. No Gun Re. This one we're gonna watch a video on.
Oh, sorry. I thought you had more.
Oh, no. There is more.
Massacre of civilians. North Korean sources claim the massacre was committed by the U.S. military and that 30,000 to 35,000 people were killed in Sinchon. Gangwon.
Yeah.
Come on. Conducted by South Korean forces. Okay, I'm beginning to see a trend. Again, South Korea.
Yeah. Last one. What do you think?
Oh wait, that's the same one. Sorry.
Yeah. What do you think?
I don't know. It kind of seems like a lot of.
It seems to me like every single one that is relevant enough to have a Wikipedia page, other than one, is attributable to the South Korean army. I just sent you a link for a video, the video that I meant to play. It's that one, the Bodo League massacre. But yeah, I mean, if it was relevant enough to have a Wikipedia page, at least on the Korean War Wikipedia, it seems that like an overwhelming majority of them were carried out by South Korea.
Okay, so this might get us clapped.
Why? It's fine. Trust me. It's a telesoldier.
I get that, all right? But
it's fine.
Do you even gun?
Why is gunt being held out? I don't even. Is this like a new word that I don't know? Like, what is the? For some reason, the chat blocker is blocking the word gunt.
So, why is it blocking the word gunt? We might have to edit this.
Maybe it's like a way of like saying the C word. Yeah, yeah.
Oh, I'm not allowing that one, Cat. But fucking, what the hell is it?
I don't know. Sam said. Yeah.
Fine.
The gun.
So, what the fuck is it? We might have to edit this part out of the YouTube when we upload it, the VOD later.
Dude, just say it with a British accent and it's fine.
No, Australian. Cunt.
Australian.
Yeah, cunt.
It eviscerates it of any, 100,000 to 200,000 people. It just said. Just pause it real quick. That just said 100,000 to 200,000 people.
That's a large margin of error.
Also, well, it's large margin of error, but also, and I'm not trying to like play the atrocity Olympics here or anything like that, but just to be fair, the one up there that was attributed to the DPRK was like 700 to 900 people. And I don't know the circumstances of it. I'm willing to condemn them for it without reading into it anymore. I'm not trying to play favorites here, but like, you can't accuse me of playing favorites or like ideological comforts or anything like that when Wikipedia itself shows like 9 of them for South Korea and 1 of them for North Korea, and that the ones that we're talking about here are like hundreds of thousands of people as opposed to like a couple hundred people. Like we're talking about 2 different worlds of atrocities here. Good. Yeah, Ross, it is a little different. Later, Lennon.
Suspected communists.
Never be too careful.
They might be lying. villain out of fucking Indiana Jones.
Exactly.
Fucking doom.
Oh yeah. Yeah, and like that's what I was too. Like, I wish we're stopping here, but like I wish we were going until 1960 when Sigmund Rhee was like overthrown for being too repressive of a dictator. Like, you know what I mean? Like there is a conclusion to this. And then did you see where he said that he lived the rest of his days out in exile? Hawaii.
Yeah.
Like, you just get to be like a brutal autocrat that just murders hundreds of thousands of people, essentially instigates a war where millions of people fucking die because you want power, and then you just get to go kick it in Hawaii until your natural death.
Right. Well, I mean, like, we don't know what the standard, what was it like? Did he have like a villa, or was he like selling meth out of a van down by the river? Like,
Dog the bounty hunter runs down on him one day.
like, we don't know. All right. We're making a lot of assumptions here. But you know what, Pat, let's see what the comments are like on this video. And
well, this is a
I am
video, so
genuinely shocked.
Telesaur is a pretty leftist news source. Pretty anti.
I never look at the comments. Ever.
I always look at the comments.
Yeah,
I'm like a comment junkie on stuff.
That's because there's something like wrong with you. I don't know what, but
yes, absolutely.
Like something it just broken inside you that does that, seeks it out.
I've watched pornography. I've watched pornography and read the comments on it because I'm just so interested in what's being said about it. It's hilarious.
You know, like, you don't have to read everything. You know,
it's
like
funny. It's funny. All right. Ashkush liked that one. Sebs. This account is but one.
Jesus
this account Christ. Is but one of a number of reports of slaughter carried out. Come on, guys, we're being serious here. We're being serious here. Reports of slaughter carried out by the South Koreans against their own people during the war. Exactly, Sebs, exactly. The New York Times reported a wave of South Korean government executions in Seoul. In December 1950, Reen Cutforth, a correspondent for the BBC in Korea, later wrote that the shooting without trial of civilians designated by the police as communist. These executions were done usually at dawn on any patch of waste ground where you could dig a trench and line up a row of prisoners in front of. And Gregory Henderson, a U.S. diplomat who served 7 years in Korea in the 1940s and 1950s, has stated that probably over 100,000 were killed without any trial whatsoever, lending more credence to the figures that were just cited in that Telesaur video by Rhee's forces in the South during the war. Following some of the massacres of civilians in the South, the Rhee government turned around and attributed them to Northern troops. This is also very common, so you also need to be careful when you hear about atrocities by the Northern Koreans. One way in which the United States contributed directly to the war's brutality was by introducing a weapon which, although used in the last stage of World War II and in Greece, was new to almost all observers and participants in Korea. It was called napalm. Here's one description of its effects from the New York Times. A napalm raid hit the village 3 or 4 days ago when the Chinese were holding up the advance. And nowhere in the village have they buried the dead yet because there is nobody left to do so. The inhabitants throughout the village and in the fields were caught and killed and kept in the exact postures they had held when the napalm struck. A man about to get on his bicycle, 50 boys and girls playing in an orphanage, a housewife strangely unmarked, holding her hand, a page torn from a Sears Roebuck catalog crayoned at mail order number 3811294 for a $2.98 bewitching bed jacket coral. There must be almost 200 dead in the tiny hamlet.
Yeah. I've heard that account before.
Yeah, I've heard that too, where it's like almost kind of like froze, like just in time. Like there's like a guy with a bicycle or something like that, right? Like, a man about to get on his bicycle. Yeah, I've heard of that. Please.
Man. And what company was it that made like a shit ton of money making that shit?
Napalm? I don't know. So look it up.
What company?
While you're pulling it up, I'm gonna pee real quick.
Or do we want to know about Ed Sheeran confessions, tears, trauma, and those bad habits?
Wait, hold on.
Oh! Huh. At Harvard, you say? Oh my god. Spicy salmon. Became scarce. Natural rubber was almost impossible to obtain after the Japanese army captured the rubber plantations in Malaya, Indonesia, Vietnam, and Thailand. Shortage of natural rubber prompted chemists at U.S. companies such as DuPont, Standard Oil, and researchers at Harvard University to develop factory-made alternatives, artificial rubber for all uses, including vehicle tires, tank tracks, gaskets, hoses, medical supplies, condoms, and rain clothing. A team of chemists led by Louis Fisier at Harvard University was the first to develop the synthetic napalm during 1942. The production of napalm was first entrusted to Nuodex Products, and by the middle of April 1942, they had developed a brown dry powder that was not sticky by itself, but when mixed with gasoline, turned into an extremely sticky, flammable substance.
Yeah, just mix a little gasoline on that. You got yourself a war weapon.
Gasoline.
That's actually what. Actually, Daddy Yankee was actually making a very progressive statement about the military-industrial complex when he wrote Gasolina.
Yes.
It's a lesser-known fact about the early 2000s hit single by Daddy Yankee.
Yes. Daddy Yankee was actually incredibly anti-war.
I don't know if people in our chat are even old enough to know about that fucking song. Actually, I think we have a mixed bag. For some reason, I just imagine chat as a bunch of Zoomers, but I don't.
Like, half our chat is, like, in their 30s, all right? If you go into, like...
They always make fun of me. They make fun of me for not knowing how to use the computer right.
Fucking,
okay?
I had James from the internet fucking...
connect to my Wi-Fi.
I said to James one time, do a poll in your chat right fucking now. I want to know what the average age of people in your chat is. The average age of people in his chat are like 40 and up. Like, there's not a single person under the age of 30 in his chat.
Sometimes I think, like, I'm too old for this. I got in this game way too fucking late.
Nah, dog. No, the only thing that we might be pushing it, right, is TikTok. We'll get roasted for our fashion sense, but I feel like our politics will really take us a long way.
Have you ever seen that meme where it's Michael J. Fox from, like, is it Back to the Future or whatever? Where he's like, you might not be ready for this, but your kids are gonna love it. And it's like a communist. It has like a hammer and sickle on it.
Yes.
That's a good one.
Yes.
Now here's No Gi Run or No Gun Re.
Oh,
I always say No Gi.
I wonder why. I wonder why your mind would say that.
The Nogunyi massacre occurred on July 26, 1950, near a small village in South Korea during the early stages of the Korean War. Just a month after the start of the war, a large number of South Korean refugees were slaughtered by multiple U.S. air and ground attacks in a span of 3 days. According to the South Korean government, an estimated 163 people were killed or missing, while according to the survivors of the massacre themselves, around 400 were killed, mostly consisting of women and children. Countless more were left wounded and scarred. This incident was unknown to the world for several decades. The U.S. Army denied and rejected the survivors' claims until 1999 after multiple investigations were launched. And only until 2001 did they finally acknowledge that the killings happened. But they still rejected the survivors' requests for apology and compensation.
Apology?
Why did this massacre
That's so funny.
take
They're like, yeah, we
place?
acknowledge that happened.
Why did the U.S. Army
Go
order
on.
its troops to slaughter hundreds of South Korean civilians, whom they were supposed to protect? The Korean War first broke out on June 25, 1950, a month earlier, when North Korean forces crossed the border into South Korea and began engaging in combat. Following the end of World War II, Korea had been divided into two states at the 38th parallel line, with a socialist North Korea being backed by the Soviet Union, and the capitalist South Korea being backed by the United States. In response to the invasion, the United Nations authorized a military force to repel the North Koreans. Thus, American troops were deployed immediately to Korea to fight alongside the South Koreans. However, the American troops were insufficiently trained, especially in dealing with civilians, and were led by inexperienced officers as well. In July, US and South Korean troops were already forced on the retreat, with several villages already captured by the North Koreans.
What?
I was talking to Admiral Lochner's comments that face it, millennials are getting older, receding hairline, expanding waistline, low T.
I ain't got no low T. I got high T.
High key, high T.
High T.
An estimated 380,000 South Korean refugees were displaced and forced to flee south towards U.S. lines. But according to reports circulating within the U.S. Army at the time, there were also supposedly disguised North Koreans among the groups of refugees. Orders were issued to fire upon civilians in the front lines to stop the so-called enemy agents. These orders were only discovered to the public decades later in declassified military archives. On July 25th, a group of around 600 South Korean villagers were being evacuated by U.S. troops. 7 of them were killed by the soldiers during the night, after straying too far from the group. The next morning, on July 26th, the soldiers had already left, and the refugees continued making their way south. Near the village of Nogunyi, the refugees were stopped one last time by U.S. soldiers at a roadblock next to a railway, where they were searched and stripped of knives and other belongings.
What?
As the refugees were resting alongside the railway, U.S. aircraft suddenly strafed and bombed them, with aircraft coming back and forth repeatedly to keep attacking. U.S. soldiers on the ground then suddenly reappeared and began shooting the wounded on the tracks, finishing them off. Refugees were forced to take shelter inside a double tunnel underneath the railroad bridge. There, they came under non-stop machine gun fire from U.S. forces on both sides of the bridge.
Both sides.
According to survivor Park Sun-young, who lost her 4-year-old son and 2-year-old daughter in the attack. Children were screaming in fear, and adults were praying for their lives, and the whole time they never stopped shooting. Trapped refugees were forced to pile up corpses as barricades and dig into the ground to hide for safety. Some survivors were so overcome by thirst that they had to drink blood-filled water from a stream underneath the bridge just to survive. The massacre continued non-stop for the next few days, with US soldiers making sure to finish off any survivors they found. Finally, on the early morning of July 29th, the US Army 7th Cavalry Regiment withdrew from the area. The massacre was not reported in official unit documents afterwards. North Korean soldiers later that afternoon arrived in Nogunyi and helped the 24 remaining survivors, who were mostly children. According to official South Korean government reports, 150 were dead, 13 were missing, and 55 were wounded, some of whom later died of those wounds. Of those victims, 70% were women and children, and men over the age of 61, while 41% of those were children under the age of 15. The survivors today claim that 400 were killed. For the next several decades, the survivors were afraid to even tell the story due to fears of official retaliation and warnings from the South Korean police to stop telling others about the massacre. They were forced to keep this to themselves. The US Army denied that such an event occurred until the Associated Press launched an investigation in 1999, which interviewed several Korean War veterans of the 7th Cavalry Regiment who were directly involved and confirmed that they were ordered to kill the civilians. The Army was forced to conduct its own investigation in 2001 and finally acknowledged the slaughter, except describing it as an unfortunate tragedy inherent to war and not a deliberate killing. The No-Go-New survivors' requests for apology and compensation were later denied. The US Army refused to open any further investigations after 2001. In the end, no soldiers were ever prosecuted for this massacre. The victims and their loved ones to this day still strive for justice and recognition. To this day, they still hold conferences and ceremonies to not only memorialize the innocent lives lost in this tragedy, but to also make sure that the world never forgets their story. This is what was done.
Which it sounds like so ridiculous. Like, how could no one be prosecuted for this? Like, how are these people just walk free? And then it's like, oh wait, I've read about the My Lai massacre. This is actually just what happens. This is actually just like everyday war activity, atrocities. No, I just need a cup, or I'm good. Okay. All right. But yeah. So and that video is so important to watch though, because a lot of these massacres are conducted by South Korean forces, but with information and suggestion and ammunition and all of the things from the United States. But this was the United States actively engaging in this type of behavior directly.
Right.
Because a lot of times they have this veil of plausible deniability. They could be like, hey, it's not us, man. South Koreans, man. They're not even white. Look how crazy they are. You know what I mean? Like this thing there, they can sell that to the American people in this kind of like racist idea of empire. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
They actually did this in Vietnam also. Like you had the CIA and the United States, they were essentially like overseeing torture facilities, like the Phoenix program or whatever it's called. But since it was South Vietnamese doing it, like these white generals or these American generals get to be like, wow, man, Vietnamese people are crazy, right? We had nothing to do with that.
Well, I think that goes back to even World War II propaganda, where like the propaganda of like the U.S. against the Japanese, some of it's like, you know, how to tell the enemy Japanese apart from our friendly Chinese ally, and like a bunch of other like insane shit using like basically phrenology and shit. And also just like, you know, dehumanizing the Japanese into like, you know, these Asiatic, you know, Oriental monsters that needed to be beaten back.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Also, I don't know if you other little bit of trivia. During the Vietnam War, the South Korean regimes that because we were pretty squarely buddied up with South Korea by the time Vietnam happened.
Right.
The South Korean regime platoons, or what do you call it? Units that were in the Vietnam War.
Yeah.
Committed a lot of atrocities. They were a lot of times used as like the attack dogs of the United States, like because like again this plausible deniability thing where it's like, hey man,
wasn't us.
Those South Koreans there, they went off. You know what I mean? Like I had nothing. You know, we would never do that, but look at them, they're crazy. But
right,
what are you gonna do?
But it's just like that. There's that one part of the video where it's like that elderly woman, you know, I'm assuming is showing like, you know, scars from the incident, right, to what I assume is an American soldier, and he can't even look.
Yeah.
And it's just like, I'm sorry. I'm not trying to compare, like, you know, whatever misdeeds the DPRK did during, like, you know, this conflict, but it just kind of pales in comparison, man.
Yeah. Hey, you can get data if former troops in Japan and Army in Korea immigrated en masse to the U.S. aftermath of the wars. And also, High has a new bookshelf. But I don't think, from everything that I know, I don't think that there was that massive of that, because I think that they essentially got what they wanted out of the situation. So,
Right.
like, now Japan is just looked at as this miracle, and South Korea is looked at this miracle, despite their colonial past or their like decades of dictatorship. So I don't think there was that many en masse immigrations to the United States by these people.
Right. It's not nearly the same as I guess like Vietnam. I don't know. I mean, because there are some like diaspora, like populations within the U.S. that emigrated because of conflict, right? From Korea, from Japan, or Japan. I think a lot of them are even before World War II. But I know that like Vietnam does. There's a large diaspora population in the U.S. that directly after Vietnam and sometimes spicy salmon. I know that like they moved here to the U.S. because of conflict with the U.S.
Right.
About how South Korea's economy was funded by the U.S. Well, yes, all of them. Whether you're talking about Japan, Singapore, Korea,
the tigers, or what do they call them? Like the Asian tiger economies.
Yeah, the flying tigers or whatever. Or yeah, no, that's right. We found that term, that like weird term that they called them. I don't know. It was something like mildly racist, like the Oriental tigers or some shit. I forget.
Yeah, the Asian tigers, I think, is what they call them. Which
Is
is
that
like
what it
racist.
is?
It's called they're called the Asian tigers. Like, hold on, let me see. Asian tiger economies. Yes.
I mean, I don't really have an opinion on.
Four Asian tigers is what it's called, or the Four Little Dragons, if you like that one better.
I feel like that's the racist one.
Hong Kong, Singapore, South Korea, and Taiwan. Actually, Japan isn't one. I'm surprised. I didn't realize that. I was wrong there.
But while it may not be one of those, right, it was another economy that we propped up with like, manufacturing and less capital intensive, capital accumulation, right, in order to subdue the Chinese economy, in order to drown it out, so to speak.
Singapore opinion. I don't know a ton about Singapore, but I do know this, that it was a British colony, or it was some type of a colony that now is a big business hub. I think it's very prosperous because of the amount of investment that goes into it, but also it has like some like extremely draconian laws about like crime and homeless people and things like that. So I don't really know enough about it that I would feel comfortable saying a lot about it. Other than it fosters like very massive business interests for the West. This year is a painting by Pablo Picasso, actually, about the No Gunry massacre, specifically inspired by it. Which is funny because when I was just learning about this, like I didn't even realize like somebody like Picasso was a communist.
Yes. Yeah, I believe isn't he was around during like the Nazis, right? And they like found him with his painting, like literally like disparaging them, and they asked him like, "What the fuck is that?" And they're like, and he was like, "It's you guys." Right? Isn't that Picasso?
Yeah.
Am I thinking of the right guy?
I'm not 100% certain, man.
Has a very influential sovereign wealth fund with lack of ethics according to public data.
Oh yeah, he did paint Bombing of Guernica.
Yeah.
That's about the Spanish Civil War, right?
Yeah. Man, he was alive for a lot of shit. A lot of really dark shit. So
have you ever seen that meme? Because it's also how I felt. It's like, isn't it funny when you realize that Pablo Picasso died in like the 1980s, and like for this whole time I've been thinking that this guy was alive in like the 1600s or something?
No. I've seen a couple. I've seen at least one art installation of his. I forget what fucking museum I was at, but it was pretty wild shit. All right, so we need to move on because like that video still has me like kind of fucked up. Like I was kind of crying. Another widely held belief in the United States during the war was that American prisoners in North Korean camps were dying off like flies because of communist neglect and cruelty. The flames of this very emotional issue were fanned by the tendency of the U.S. officials to exaggerate the numbers involved. during the November 1951 during November 1951, for example, long before the end of the war, American military announcements put the count of POW deaths between 5,000 and 8,000. That's a big margin of error. Again, what the fuck? However, an extensive study completed by the U.S. Army 2 years after the war revealed that POW death toll for the entire war was 2,730 out of 7,190 held in camps. An unknown number of other prisoners never made it to the camps, being shot in the field because of the inconvenience of dealing with them in the midst of combat, a practice engaged in by both sides. The study concluded that there was evidence that the high death rate was not due primarily to the communist maltreatment. It could be accounted for largely by the ignorance or the callousness of the prisoners themselves. Callousness refers here to the soldiers' lack of morale and collective spirit. Although not mentioned in the study, the North Koreans on several occasions claimed that many American POWs also died in the camps as a result of the heavy U.S. bombing.
Which has to have happened. Like, you can't bomb 85% of the structures in a country or half of a country and then be like, wait, what do you mean our POWs are dead?
Right. Oh, also,
I'm not saying that accounts.
Admiral Lochner, Picasso is the first artist in the modern times to die rich, so he was not an altruist. Not only is that historically inaccurate, as art was normally made for rich people specifically, not poor people, right? But the fact remains that, like, you know, in order to be a communist or to ascribe yourself a communist, much of the time it is you are a member of the Communist Party. It's not about how much money you have, right? Otherwise we wouldn't even have, you know, the movement that we have today, because Engels was actually the wealthy son of a factory owner that was able to kind of logistically fund a lot of the projects that Marx did.
Don't you dare insult Hassan Piker like that, okay? Right.
So, like, you know, not only was he able to fund, like, you know, Marx's writings and stuff like that, but he was also able to, like, you know, directly, you know, unionize his own workplace, right? He owned the goddamn factory. You know, plus he also helped fund the fact that, like, did you know that Marx organized labor unions and stuff? Yeah. So, like,
know a lot about it.
Yeah, that's one of the things that, like, you know, he was able to do because he had his buddy Engels, you know, who came from, you know, money, right?
Oh, yeah.
But anyways, what were we talking about right after that? I'm sorry I interrupted you, Pat.
Well, I think I was saying how, like, it's very, well, first I said that, dude, if you have that extensive of a bombing campaign, some POWs are going to die. Yeah. But also, I don't actually have that much disdain for the execution of American POWs. I'm not saying that, like, I think that they should all just be, like, shot on the spot, but I think it's very different here. When you catch an American in the Korea thing is much more nebulous because you don't know if a Korean is a collaborator or this or that. But if you're an American and you're in Korea, you're only there as a occupying, invading force. And I mean, with the extent and brutality of this, to have to, you know, having any degree of ethical treatment of catching these people is commendable to a degree. The fact that they weren't just immediately shot for treason and invasion and brutalizing your people is anything a step more humane than that should be recognized.
I think you should all. Please don't get mad. I think you should check out that season of Blowback because they go over the account. They go over the, like, longest. They kind of compare the two. There was, I believe he's an American POW, right, who was actually treated very well, very good. You know, they have a quote from one of the people that, like, you know, first interrogated him. And it turns out the guy that was interrogating the American was, I was one of the people that you had put into a, basically, what would you call it? Where they round up the leftists and they put them in prison. Right. And they interrogate.
All that?
Yeah.
I don't know, political repression. I'm not sure is there a special name for it? Like
they put him in like a camp of sorts, this Korean gentleman, for being
a concentration camp.
A place to rethink what you once thought, right? There you go. Yeah. So, like, this Korean gentleman approached him and said, like, when I was a teenager, you put me inside, a place like this, and it's funny now that, like, the situations are reversed, but I'm going to treat you much better than you ever treated me. Meanwhile, in South Korea, they had like the longest running fucking like political prisoner, I think, in history so far. He was in a South Korean prison for like 50 years or 40 years or something.
Johnny, do you want to answer that question asked by Baldwin's Ghost?
Why is Pat mad about blowback? Their production quality is better. All right, so I guess you weren't here for when we went over this on Wednesday. So Pat, prior to the announcement that blowback was going to be going over as the Korean War, right?
I think it's before even the Cuba one came out.
I think, yeah, even before the Cuban one came out. Pat was voraciously reading books about Korea. He read over a dozen books, cover to cover, right? And he was like trying to figure out while reading.
40-page script.
Right. He wrote a 40-page script, right? And like, I as his friend with like many friends that are content creators, whether it's like podcasts or Twitch streams or YouTube channels or what have you, right? Was like trying to figure out like the best way for my friend to be able to do this. And he wanted to do like, a YouTube kind of video essay, but he's like, this is going to be way too long, I need to figure out how to do this. And I was like, all right, well, let's make like a podcast or something, and I'll just be like, your straight man, to like, bounce shit off of, so that way, like, I'm like your audience in real time. I don't know who that is, Sam. And so like, Pat and me were like trying to figure out if we should make this like a podcast or should we make this like a Twitch stream or a YouTube video or something. And then Blowback announces like, we're going to be going over Korea. And Pat is just immediately like deflated. Like he like literally went into like a depressive episode because of it, because of the amount of time invested.
And not only that, but when I heard of what they were doing, they were hitting so many of the same, like they were Bruce Cummings and like so many things, and I was like, man, like it's like the Gwangju uprising, like all the things that I wanted to talk about was just like taken, and I think they did a great job with it. I love Blowback. I love listening to them. I'm not actually a hater. I'm just
he's like
salty over like the way that it played out.
Yeah. So, like, we don't actually hate Blowback. Pat doesn't actually hate Blowback. It's just it's a sore spot. It's a sore spot for him because they kind of beat him to the punch. That like
now it's kind of become a joke more than anything.
Yeah.
For me to like get mad about Blowback.
Yeah. So I think that like if for our audience, right? If you haven't listened to the third season of Blowback, like what are you doing? Like,
The only reason I haven't listened to it is because I got depressed when I put the first episode on.
Right.
It literally depressed me because they were talking about so many of the things that I wanted to talk about. And I was just like, it was just so hard for me to listen to it.
Yeah. So, that's the inside joke there. But, if you haven't listened to it, right, next time you're going for like a long drive or you're just, it's starting to get warmer out there, throw on a pair of earbuds or something, go like walk around the park or something, make sure you get up and you get a little bit of physical health in. All right. I don't know earlier if people saw me, like, I was like walking on this like fucking, under the desk treadmill thing I bought because, I think we can all say that we're pretty affectionate of the late, great Michael Brooks. And one of the reasons why he passed away is because, he literally was so committed to the grind. He was sitting at a desk multiple hours a day, not getting enough physical exercise. He had a blood clot that fucking killed him. Get out there, get moving, all right?
That is the only millennial with certified Korean War PTSD. Yeah.
One day I want to have this guy on.
Who is that?
He's the guy from East is a Podcast. He's great.
Okay.
Sorry, I'm trying not to cry right now. So the predicted Chinese aggression manifested itself about 4 months after the war in Korea began. The Chinese entered the war after American planes had violated their airspace on a number of occasions, had bombed and strafed Chinese territory several times, always in error. When hydroelectric plants on the Korean side of the border, vital to Chinese industry, stood in great danger, and U.S. or South Korean forces had reached the Chinese border, the Yalu River, or come within a few miles of it in several places, the question must be asked: how long would the United States refrain from entering a war being waged in Mexico by a communist power from across the sea, which strafed and bombed Texas border towns, was mobilized along the Rio Grande, and was led by a general who threatened war against the United States itself? So Kay has a question for you, Pat.
Yeah, what made you interested in studying Korean history? So I was just kind of like just getting into like leftist political history, and I was just kind of like buying books as I came across them, and there wasn't like anything specific in my life, but like one time I got this Facebook advertisement for this book called Asia's Unknown Uprisings by George Kalafisakis. It's a Greek last name. It's really hard to pronounce, but there's 2 volumes of it, and the first volume is only about South Korean social movements. And I bought it just because they look cool. Like, I didn't really have like this like really deep desire to be like, I'm gonna get the bottom of this Korean thing. I had like just like a bunch of books. I was just buying books faster than I could read them, which is something that I still do. And then like as I get through the bookshelf, I just kind of got to the book and I picked it up and I was like, all right, I'll read this. And by the end of it, like my mind was blown, just because it was a perspective that I never had heard before, and it really captivated me in a way that made me really interested in it. And the history of it was so alien to what I had been told about certain world events that I just kept getting more books to learn more about it. And then once I decided to do the video on it, I bought more books because like I would be reading the one book and it would quote another book and I'd be like, oh man, that's weird. Like, let me see if I can find that book. And if I couldn't find it online, I would just buy it. And then like, that's how I ended up with so many books. It was a rabbit hole.
what got me interested in it is specifically maybe not to the same degree as Pat, just because I'm not nearly as like, you know, well trained of a reader as him. But it was always used, the DPRK specifically is always used as like the gotcha for any like argument regarding socialism, right? Like China is like, you know, a big one, you know, it always is. You know, Cuba's kind of like an older, like, you know, Gen Xer kind of one. But the DPRK, right, as a millennial, was consistently used as an example of, you know, they're the hermit kingdom. They're you know, even by avowed communists, will often, you know, be used as like in this kind of derogatory way of like, yeah, but not like the DPRK, you know, like they're different. They're not practicing, you know, socialism or anything like that. And I think that they are. I think they are practicing socialism. I think they are developing socialism. I think that, you know, that they are doing it the way in which that they have been able to construct it. And I think that it should be admired, and I think that it should be venerated for everything that it has been able to accomplish, you know, considering the position that they are put into from a geopolitical perspective. And yes, the Korean War is buried. We, you know, are very rarely taught legitimate reasons as to how or why the war, you know, began, what occurred during it, you know, et cetera, everything that we've basically been talking about and everything that, like, you know, Pat has researched. Which, by the way, we do plan on having more episodes, kind of like what we did Wednesday. But we are kind of hoping to do that more as like a Patreon thing, or we're hoping to like be able to kind of bump up the production value of it a little bit better than, like, you know, we can for here on Twitch, you know. So if you have it, you know, maybe throw a sub, some bits, you know, something like that. We're always indebted to Hash Kush, but, like, you know, if you got, like, you know, $5 to throw at us, you know, we wouldn't mind.
And we could say anything that you want to contribute to us financially, we can say that pretty much at this point in our development, it would be pretty much used solely for the progression of the channel and what we can produce here. Like the first payout we got of Twitch, that was like anything like somewhat significant.
Thank you, Maverick.
That was anything somewhat significant, and I use the word significant extremely lightly here. Like a fraction of what I make in my paycheck is pretty much like what I'm saying when I use the word significant. But we paid for the art for here, and now we want to do like some other stuff where we want to like get like maybe an intro and like maybe get like a soundboard or something like that for Johnny. I know he wants one of those. So it's like at this point we are in a like definite like building portion, and we want to do podcasts. We want to do edited YouTube content. We want to do all these things.
Thank you again, Maverick.
And if anybody is like interested in supporting and us doing that, this isn't something that would be used like to like furnish a lavish lifestyle. It would be just to grow the Subversive History project.
I promise that neither me nor Pat will ever buy a Taycam with any money that is given to us. Like the electric Porsche that Hassan bought. Like I just want you to know that, like, you know, the money that you give to us, right, will specifically go towards us, like, you know, doing things like going back to India, right, going to Vietnam. The dream is one day that we can go to the DPRK. I would love nothing more than to visit the DPRK and stream from the DPRK. You know,
Johnny would grovel on his knees
you have
to atone for the sins.
No idea how hard I'm gonna simp. All right, you have no idea. I'm sorry, Kay. How do you say?
No, Adland. We can hang out. Just
we can hang out here. We can hang out here for a minute.
Just let us know when you're back in. Let us know when the ad's over. Oh, look at that.
Would we search for a
Hey,
date?
they're back. What's that?
UD search for a date in the DPRK?
I have a feeling that we would be appointed state-subsidized dates, if I understand how the Korean nationalization of women and also other
like
communist
that?
empires'
No, what the fuck?
socialization of women.
No, I'm married. I don't need a date. No, I would fucking like.
Yeah, I'm just kidding.
No.
I have a girl. I was making a joke about like about communists like nationalizing women. And Kay, how you say don't ever worry about like we would never want to shake anybody down for money and like that. It's like you have to feel some kind of obligation. We're just kind of throwing it out there. Like if anybody is interested in supporting us in doing anything where we expand, just know that that's what we would be using anything that you gave to us.
You get swayed parter? Only.
I think they're saying that you'd get DPRK privileges. Like.
Thank you, Ross.
Oh, shit, Ross.
So
Wow,
much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you. What an angel.
Thank you. And you know what? Like, remind us, like, you know, when we're done with this chapter, to check out your Twitter project that you got going on. All right.
Yeah, which is actually really awesome.
Yeah. You know, we never have a problem. Oh fuck, we have like a hype train going on. Should I like?
Oh wow. Should we put on Juche Gang?
Should I put on Juche Gang?
Have you already looked that up?
No.
Little hype train real quick.
Lil Pump. Juche Gang. Oh, self-reliant.
No shakedowns? SMH. I was just about to join the Subversive History Mafia. You missed out.
Juche Gang. Sprint 3 Rex on some new brain. My crony love doing Juche. I fucking fears I forgot the name. Yeah.
Juche is the first leader of the DPRK? DPEK?
Juche Gang. 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 Sprint 3 Rex on some new brain. My crony love doing Juche.
Thank you again so much. Hash Kush, you keep this thing going, right? It's almost, I would feel bad. I would feel remiss if, like, you know, when we're planning to go to the DPRK that we don't invite Hash Kush because they technically would have like financed the entire operation.
Got some red suits for free. Fuck your army, fuck your bourgeoisie. Bitch, your press expresses sadness. America's democracy's found to madness. Kim Jong-un show no tenderness. America's strategies crying about the status. Everybody screaming, fuck the US. Lil Kim be laughing about the progress. North Korea controlling the ICBM tech. If America gonna attack, we're wrecking right back.
Like, that's what's like wild is that almost everybody that you're seeing in this video probably has a grandparent, right, that survived a US bombing, right? Everyone in that video, right, has a family member that survived a near fucking genocide of their people, of their culture, of their entire country, right? And every fucking year they have to deal with the US and how many other countries practicing to fucking finish the fucking job half a century fucking later. Thank you, Maverick.
That's it. Another hit.
It's just, it's beyond fucked. Should never fucking be like this. Thank you, Sam, for the 100 bits or 200 bits or whatever the hell it is. I don't know what that is. Fucking. You guys ever listen to Gaius?
Lil Pump. Juche Gang.
Fucking Gaius Guevara is fucking great.
Before we start, alright.
No, that ain't it. That ain't what I'm trying to do. I fucking love this guy.
Shirt, it means false idolatry.
You should look him up, and if he's playing in your city, you should go out and see him. Alright?
No allegiance to black folk, no allegiance to indigenous folk. Fuck all them niggas. Always align yourself with niggas that's really for the better.
Chain with us all like a Scarface. I've been a nigga to get it. I pay for a hair and a rent with a parlay. Crackers be trying to tell niggas like they wasn't laughing at blackface. Plus, I am gonna kill me a cracker. That shit not a joke, it's a showcase. Hey, might fuck around and then post Sharia law on that red scene. I don't give a fucking scared of nothing if that bitch bleed. Peep, they feel the guy hand. Knew I was a target and I turned that into finance. I thought we rely. I hope this black ain't got a tap dance. Give a fuck about some rap fans. Fetishize my trauma, bring the drama, bitch. I slap fans. Catch 'em at a show, want you to blow it when they clap hands. Hey, got more hits than an Andy Murray backhand. Hitters worldwide through the broadband. Had this world flip like a headstand. Running with them Rams, feel like Busy Bones, Highland. And niggas talking scars like it's cool to be called lacking. I don't do that rap shit, bitch. I learned from martyrs. Why would I pray for your city when niggas be whipping the O's at the border? How was your hood in the drop, but you talking about how your chain be the water? Rap game like Jamaican spots, y'all shit be out of order. Heard you sold your spirit, I can feel it, hear it in your lyrics. Rap is disappearing, but the money keep on coming. Interesting, but too be niggas eerie for the coverage. Susceptible, deceptive, see me yo with no surprise.
Hey, where the bitches at? It's supposed to be titties. Where the fucking titties and the bitches? Fight.
See, look at how much fun they're having there. You could be having that fun. You could be going to see him live. He might be playing in your city tonight. You don't even know it yet. So yeah, Gaius Guevara, Ghais Guevara, like Che Guevara.
If you feel discouraged about it, if you feel defeated and all those things, feel that. It's okay. Feel discouraged, feel disgusted, feel defeated. Feel that for a while, and then get back up and start fighting again. It's not because it's a good idea. It's not because it would make a better world. It's because we have to. It's out of necessity. It's for our survival. It's for the survival of real democracy.
Thank you,
which they are nibbling
Magyar
away at
guy.
and cutting back at.
The subscription at tier 1.
Repressive laws, and it's for the very survival of the earth itself. I have a friend who.
Is this entirely this, Ross? Is there any music that comes at some point with this?
And the Chinese.
Not that I don't love Papa Parenti.
In his wrist, put one in his leg, and he said, "Wait a minute, well, I don't get the connection. I got a neck. My neck is hurting me, and you're putting a needle in my arm and in my leg. What's the connection?" And the Chinese acupuncturist said, "Whole body connected. Take a look." You know, that typical Chinese
Thank you,
gentle
Mavericks,
contempt
for another
for the
300
Westerners'
bits.
idiocy. You know, and so what we got to say: whole society connected. Take a look. Whole universe connected. Take a look. It's our universe, and we've got to fight to keep it. Thank you.
Hell yeah. Thank you, Hashkush, again for another fucking, like, 5 tier 1 gifted subs. God damn.
When it gets cold and it feels like the end,
We are gonna get DMCA'd so fucking hard for this part.
I won't give in. No, I won't give in.
It's gonna be me and Pat. DVR Ted. There.
'Cause you know we'll make it through, we'll make it through. Just stay strong. 'Cause you know I'm here for you, I'm here for you. There's nothing you can say, nothing you can do. There's no other way when it comes to the truth. So keep holding on. 'Cause you know we'll make it through, we'll make it through. So far away, I wish you were here. Before it's too late, this could all disappear. Before the doors
Look, dude, he's doing the Euro step. That shit that got Che all pissed off.
with you by my side, I will fight and
Thank you.
defend.
Is that another 5? Like you wanna do something? Oh, that's another? Jesus, Hashkush. Thank you so much.
Cause you know we'll make it through, we'll make it through. Just
I mean, Jared Leto it probably did rip this off, Sean. Oh, you know what? What are you saying, Pat? Which thing? I want to see if Algiers has a music video with Zach De La Rocha.
I heard it moved too. You have to get out and push the Hash Kush. How are you doing this, Hash Kush? This is
How?
ridiculous.
Oh my God! I look away for a second and out. Friggin' Hash Kush is 10 gifted subs.
18 trained in the club right now.
Jesus Christ!
We are all shaking it for Hash Kush. Go on, Ralph.
Have you ever heard of this?
No,
time to go. Should've known I seen it inside and outside town. 7-headed Harley rapping, started with 10 hoes that doubt and feel the
Algiers is amazing. This is their song with Zach De La Rocha from Rage Against the Machine. If they're playing in your fucking city ever, fucking go. It's the most ridiculous shit you will ever see live. Also, if you listen to this while you're driving, you will get a speeding ticket. Like, this is not good. If you're trying not to be like an aggressive driver, like this is not what you should be listening to.
Undeniable, something real and shifted in the air, so survivable. Don't take the bait, my friend. Let the yoke will let you tear. Now you can stay in your hand. Morning star is both sun, the light before the dawn. Left and right, and shit sound will crumble one by one. 4 dimensions falling over when the angle change.
Also, they are comrades.
Yo, it's a relapse with a big guard. No rehab for my jihad. Oh, raps up with a grief storm. Time on my negative beat gone. And my peace torn in an alley, abandoned and murdered and reborn in a beat form. And breathless, and I exhale, and I rearm. And a spin won't stop. Nazi pop opera, they found a flock. Now looking for a roll to block. Padlocks, pants and socks. Place to wash this paint off. And a mirror cracks and a face off. And I've seen it up.
Seen it up, catacombs will watch you fall. Hold it up, seen it up, can't with me out, cause I'm dreaming. Seen it up, catacombs will watch you fall. Hold it up, seen it up, can't with me stand up. I'm rolled up, seen it up, catacombs will watch you fall. Hold it up, seen it up, can't with me out, cause I'm dreaming. Seen it up, catacombs will watch you fall. Hold it up, seen it up, can't with me out.
So I feel like, Pat, you'll probably know this one, right? And that we should definitely play this, right? especially for fans that have always wanted to get into punk, but like, you know, is there such a thing as like communist punk?
To those who can hear me, I say,
There
do
is.
not despair.
And it's
the misery
called
that is now upon
Man
us is but
Lifting
the passing
Banner.
of greed, the bitterness of men who fear the way of human progress. The hate of men will pass, and dictators die, and the power they took from the people will return to the people. And so long as men die, liberty will never perish.
Hell yeah. Thank you, Chad. This could not happen without you. You would not want it to happen without you. Thank you, Sam, for the 100 bits. Thank you, Hash Kush, for the 200 bits. Thank you so much. Whitey Corngood for the subscription at Tier 1 for 2 months. The only way that you're going to be able to see these guys live is if you already live in one of those like Nordic countries. So, was that Pat?
I think they're from Amsterdam.
Yeah. So yeah, that was, I think, like, that was a great hype train, everybody. Thank you so very kindly. I promise you that, like, everything that you give to us, right, will always go back to this stream, and will always go back to giving you the best kind of educational, materialist content that you could ever want. I promise. So, where the fuck were we?
I think we were right here. I'll start reading.
All right.
American air power in Korea was fearsome to behold, as would be the case in Vietnam. Its use was celebrated in the wholesale of dropping napalm, the destruction of villages, suspected of aiding the enemy, bombing cities so as to leave no useful facility standing, demolishing dams and dikes to cripple the irrigation system, wiping out rice crops, and in those moving expressions like scorched earth policy, saturation bombing, and Operation Killer. "You can kiss that group of villages goodbye," exclaimed Captain Everett L. Hundley of Kansas City, Kansas, after a bombing raid. "I would say that almost the entire Korean peninsula is just a terrible mess," testified Major General Emmett O'Donnell before the Senate when the war was 1 year old. "Everything is destroyed. There is nothing standing worthy of a name." And here are the words of the venerable British military guide Brassey's Annual in its 1951 yearbook. "It is no exaggeration to state that South Korea no longer exists as a country. Its towns have been destroyed, much of its means of livelihood eradicated, and its people reduced to a sullen mass dependent upon charity and exposed to subversive influences. When the war ends, no gratitude can be expected from the South Koreans, but it is to be hoped that the lesson will have been learned that it is worse than useless to destroy to liberate. It is worse than useless to destroy to liberate. Certainly, Western Europe would never accept such a quote-unquote liberation."
Right. Because at the end of the day, it wasn't about liberation. It was from the very beginning, like you talked about last Wednesday, Pat. It was about ensuring that there was a market to be open, right? And not just open, but completely subservient to Western interests and Western capital development. And thank you, Ross, for letting us know that we're all right. I'd like to think that, you know, we're pretty okay. But, you know, if we're all right, I think that's even better. Wow. I wonder how...
I just put this up because I couldn't find a good video that actually talked about this. This just has like some stats and stuff like that I was...
Precision... That's another thing. Precision bombing? I feel like, is there such a thing as like...
Yeah.
It's like a precision grenade. Is there any specific part?
Just go back up. I mean, we can really read through like most of it, but I think just the overall, this first kind of description of it. Air Forces of the United Nations Command carried out an extensive bombing campaign against North Korea from 1950 to 1953 during the Korean War. It was the first major bombing campaign in the United States Air Force since its inception in 1947 from the United States Army Forces. During the campaign, conventional weapons such as explosive, incendiary bombs, and napalm destroyed nearly all of the country's cities and towns, including an estimated 85% of its buildings. So that's like the main...
And that's like the entire country. That's not just like one side of it.
No, I think this is the bombing of North Korea.
Okay, so this is specifically North Korea.
But yeah, that's like the main thing. If you want to leaf through it and see if there's anything else.
By comparison, the U.S. dropped 1.6 million tons in the European theater and 500,000 tons in the Pacific theater during all of World War II, including 160,000 on Japan. North Korea ranks alongside Cambodia, 500,000 tons, Laos, 2 million tons, and South Vietnam, 4 million tons, as among the most heavily bombed countries in history. And they got a total of 635,000 tons. Good Lord.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely atrocious. Just like a holocaust in just about every sense of the word. I think even in the strictest definition of the term, the term holocaust means like to destroy by fire or something like that, right?
That's what I, remember that's what Earth Crisis told me. Right? I feel like, if we had more hype trains, we would probably play a lot more like hardcore stuff.
Why?
I don't know. That's like our thing, right? I feel like that's what makes us just a little bit like, more different. We're both fans of like hardcore music,
Yeah, I would play Firestorm right now. I don't care.
I'd play fucking Chat Pile. That's technically like new metal. I got enough Chat Pile t-shirts. Well, fucking me and Pat, fucking yesterday when we went into the city, right? I'm wearing my Chat Pile shirt and he's wearing a fucking Vision of Disorder. I'm like, yeah, it's like both kind of like new metal.
Yeah, just different phases of new metal.
Yeah. Some Long Island new metal. It actually went pretty good, I wish that Marcus was there. I feel like because of everything that happened, with everything he's got going on. Oh, David can tell you all about it himself, but I think everything, went pretty good. Right, David? You had fun going to the city for your first time?
You have fun, guy?
You having fun?
We had pie.
We had
all
pie.
Sat down for some pie.
Yeah, we had coffee and pie.
In the diner.
In New York, no less.
We visited the Lenin statue in New York, which, if you don't know, there is a Lenin statue up on a roof in New York.
Oh, shit. Yeah, that's right. I gotta try and get, the pic. They're, really shitty. You can barely even see him, but, you just see this guy doing, it's this weird hand gesture if it's like this, right? But, it's from an upwards angle, so it's kind of awkward looking, but,
And my pie, that's expensive pie. It probably is above marker pie.
I don't know about that. I don't think for what, how many people got like pie and coffee? That was like 5 of us there, right? It wasn't that expensive.
No.
Right? I was actually expecting it to be a lot more. Stratemeyer summarized the instructions as follows. Every installation, facility, and village in North Korea now becomes a military and tactical target. Stratemeyer sent orders to the 5th Air Force and Bomber Command to destroy every means of communications and every installation, factory, city, and village. So this goes back to, like things that would happen again in Iraq specifically, right, where there... red zones, what is it called? It's like a fire zone where like if you're in that vicinity, like you're a military combatant in the US.
Free fire zone. Yeah.
Free fire zone, where pretty much like the entire northern half of the country becomes a free fire zone.
Maverick, no, it was a literal pie. I had banana cream pie.
No. And we didn't even actually have New York pizza. We had sandwiches from the deli, which in my opinion I think is probably more New York than pizza.
What is the deli?
Yeah, getting a good sandwich from the deli.
Yeah, it was good. I enjoyed my sandwich. Yeah, David got a red velvet cake.
Yeah, I got
like
some
a classy gentleman.
I got some banana pudding. Not banana pudding. What am I talking? Bread pudding.
Yeah, dude. Back off the banana. I had banana.
Yeah, you had the banana. That shit looked really fucking good.
It looked better than it was. It
Really?
was really just like a bunch of icing. Like, I don't know what the deal with it was. It was kind of weird. It was almost like they just gave me a scoop of icing.
Yeah. Well, it's like, the ratio was off.
What are you guys talking about?
Oh, yeah. What was the diner that we went to?
Regiment. What was it called? If my girlfriend's in the chat, please tell us the diner that we went to last night.
Without doxing yourself, please tell us which diner were we at? We did, Wilco. Hopefully we get to come out to a DC thing. I promise that we'll all make sure we bring enough cash to buy some candles.
Y'all got candles?
Yeah, Wilco's got candles. If you're looking for like a wonderful, thoughtful gift for your girlfriend for any, birthdays or occasions that might be coming up. Maybe for like your mother or something, Your mother, she probably likes candles. What mother doesn't love candles? Buy candles from Wilco. They are ethically sourced. They're honestly made, honestly sold.
My girlfriend just texted me and said, I love candles.
Yeah, well.
You see?
Hint, hint, wink, wink, Patrick. Wait, you're about to lose it? Like, you're no longer going to be selling candles? Are you saying, Wilco, are you saying that you're about to lose it over the candles guy? I mean, the guy this morning from Ben's chat or the candles? Oh, yeah, no, that chatter was just fuck.
Candle discourse?
I wish I wasn't driving. No, Ben this morning had, like, some dude going off about how, like, yeah, but what about honest capitalism? Pat, can't you name some honest capitalisms?
I mean, well, like, what does honesty mean? Because, like, I think there's plenty of honest capitalists that you could be as honest as you want and still, like, repress someone to a, like, a little above subsistence. You can be like,
right.
You can be honest and be like, I am merely better than you.
Right.
That's why I have all this opulence.
Right.
And, you are just, lesser than me.
Right.
And that's why you don't deserve teeth in your mouth.
Right. Your luxury bones.
That's an honest capitalist.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That doesn't mean that the system should be defended.
I think, personally, I think Trump is the perfect example of an honest capitalist because there's no way in hell he doesn't know that everyone else is in on the grift. And if you're too dumb to fall for the grift, then, like, right? Am I wrong here?
Well, no.
I was still in bed, but that guy was driving me nuts. In the wake of the Kangi attack, FEAF began an intensive firebombing campaign that quickly incinerated multiple Korean cities. 3 weeks after the attacks began, the Air Force assessed the damage as follows. Oh, wow. Well, at least this city came out all right, right?
Destroyed.
What?
I believe that would be the percentage of the city that was destroyed.
Well, I mean, like this one, Uichu? I don't know how to. I'm sorry. I don't know how to pronounce this, but this city only had like 20%. You know?
Yeah. Yeah, they did all right.
They did all right.
Imagine if like 20% of you lost 20% of your arm or something like that. You'd be all right.
Yeah, yeah.
Let's get back to the slides.
Okay. All right.
I'm starting to get loopy here. The worst of the bombing was yet to come. That began in the summer of 1952 and was Washington's way of putting itself in a better bargaining position in the truce discussions with the communists, which had been going on for a full year while the battles raged. The extended and bitter negotiations gave rise to another pervasive Western belief that it was predominantly communist intransigence, duplicity, and lack of peaceful intentions which frustrated the talks and prolonged the war. This is a lengthy and entangled chapter of the Korean War story, but one does not have to probe too deeply to discover the unremarkable fact that the barriers were erected by the anti-communist side as well. Syngman Rhee, for example, was so opposed to any outcome short of total victory that both the Truman and Eisenhower administration drew up plans for overthrowing him, which is not to suggest that the American negotiators were negotiating in the best faith. The last thing they wanted was to be accused of having allowed the commies to make suckers of them. Thus, it was that in November of 1951, we could read in the New York Times, the unadorned way that an apparently increasing number of them, American soldiers in Korea, see the situation right now is that the communists have made important concessions, while the United Nations command, as they view it, continues to make more and more demands. The United Nations truce team has created the impression that it switches its stands whenever the communists indicate that they might go along with it. So there's even some evidence here from the New York Times, at least from whatever information that they're gathering, that the communist side of Korea was being a little bit more agreeable in terms of like, how are we going to figure this truce out? And all the duplicity and intransigence was on the side of the United Nations.
Right, because every time that like they came close to like the DPRK being like, all right, that sounds probably as good as we're going to get. So the UN will be like, well, actually, we're going to add another thing to it. And to answer a question from chat, has a new bookshelf, asks what you think would happen if very high earners, income not in sports or gambling and socialism. I'm assuming that doctors, not dictators, big architects, lawyers, head engineer. Well, that's the thing, is that every society rewards, people who hold positions of great importance, monetarily or with like, some other like frame of reference for reward, right? And for some countries in the modern day, that's high wages. It's not as if the Soviet Union didn't reward engineers or artists, musicians, scientists, doctors, teachers, intellectuals of that sort.
As much as people want to be like, oh, communism is when everyone gets everything the same and everyone gets exactly the same of everything. That's not what it was. That even in the Soviet Union, even in China, these are not how things operated.
Yes, Michael Parenti wrote about that, pretty not extensively, but he answered that question.
Covers it succinctly in Black Shirts and Reds.
Yes, succinctly in Black Shirts and Reds. And even if you look at China today, you see teachers and educators, being put on billboards and stuff, and being venerated, within society.
You also see billionaires.
Yeah, billionaires too. But here's the thing: is that billionaires can have their wealth expropriated for public good, right? To fund things like high-speed rail, public transportation, and other such programs for public benefit.
Hey, how do you say? That's awesome. That's going to be your next book. The only regret is that you weren't here reading it along with us when we did a chapter by chapter breakdown of Black Shirts and Reds. If you are interested in having at least something close to the experience as you read each chapter, feel free to visit our YouTube channel and maybe listen to the VOD as we discuss all the specifics of it.
I know, Kay. Trust me, I wish that, like, you know, everybody that we've sort of gained along the way, you know, was here for it. I don't think we'll ever run out of new books to read, but in a perfect world, you know, one day we can revisit again with even older eyes and, you know, be even more taken aback by the things that we missed on the previous read through. So, once upon a time, the United States fought a great civil war in which the North attempted to reunite the divided country through military force. Did Korea or China or any other foreign power send in an army to slaughter Americans, charging Lincoln with aggression? I mean, the UK did kind of pick a side, but, you know, why did the United States choose to wage full-scale war in Korea? Only a year earlier, in 1949, in the Arab-Israeli fighting in Palestine and in the India-Pakistani war over Kashmir, the United Nations, with American support, had intervened to mediate an armistice. Not to send in an army to take sides and expand the fighting. And both these conflicts were less in the nature of a civil war than was the case in Korea. If the US-UN response had been the same in these earlier cases, Palestine and Kashmir might have wound up as the scorched earth desert that was Korea's fate. What saved them? What kept the US armed forces out? Was no more than the absence of a communist side of the conflict. And even that, I would say, is not quite. I think it's like not a prominent communist side, maybe.
Yeah, I would agree, because that was there. Like, to say that there wasn't the not the PLO, but the other one that Leila Khalid was a part of.
Right, the PFLP.
PFLP, exactly. Yeah. Marxist-Leninist, you know, organized, very popular, but pretty much suppressed even more rigorously than any other Palestinian liberation organization, at least from my understanding.
One could say that the entire reason that Hamas is, like, even a thing is because, you know, the secular PLO, PFLP.
If you put any stock into the writings of Ian Pape, which I do put significant stock into, then what you're saying is exactly correct.
I mean, like, you don't even have to go by Ilan Pape. You could literally go by, like, what, like, the IDF has said themselves and admitted to themselves. You can go by literally what fucking, what's his nuts? The
Bibi?
Bibi, I think, has said it. I think even Pompeo, who wasn't even around for it, talked about it when it was going on. Benny? Bibi? God King Bibi? Straight out of Philadelphia, born and raised?
Is unelected airwaves in here right now?
Netin Slobyu. Netin! Oh, did you see his Instagram post the other day?
Kanye West?
Yeah.
No,
it's official, everybody. Kanye West is no longer anti-Semitic. He found God again in his heart after watching 21 Jump Street. My wife...
said?
Yes, this is a real thing. I'm not lying. Why would I lie about this? My wife showed me an Instagram post by Kanye West that he watched the seminal film 21 Jump Street with... Channing Tatum and who's the other guy? Jonah Hill. And Jonah Hill, being the Jewish man that he is, you know, he literally could not.
That inspired him. Yeah, Kanye West was like, you know what, Jews aren't that bad because Jonah Hill is hilarious.
Yeah, no, really. Did you find it?
I'm looking at it. Chill out. Watching Jonah Hill and 21 Jump Street made me like Jewish people again. No one should take anger against one or two individuals and transform that into hatred towards millions of innocent people. No Christian can be labeled anti-Semite knowing Jesus is Jew. Thank you, Jonah Hill. I love you.
He's back, ladies and gentlemen.
Adidas fired up.
Jesus walks with me.
Adidas, fire up them Yeezys. We're back.
We're back, baby.
We're back getting money.
Yeezy machine go brrrr.
Machine go brrrr. Oh, jeez.
Oh, wow. That was it. That was the last one.
That's it. That's it.
Yes, you can finally listen to College Dropout with a clean. Is it even still on Spotify? I thought they took it down, or did they only take down the like later stuff?
I don't really got I don't really listen to Kanye West, so I don't know.
Man,
I didn't like Kanye West before it was cool.
All right, like first of all, Yeezus is good. All right, and like his first 2 albums are also like really good.
I had this weird thing where like when I finally started getting into hip hop after listening to like exclusively punk.
Yeah.
Like I didn't listen to hip hop when I was like a kid, and I like found it like in like early high school, and like I really got into it. But like I got into it with this really purist mindset. Like I took, how like elitist punks are with like cool bands and like anti-mainstream shit.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
So like directly when I got into hip hop, I was like, I'm only listening to Nas and Big Pun and Big L and Wu-Tang and Gangstar. I was like, I'm only
only
listening to
shit
that.
that's like fucking 20 years old.
Exactly. Well, just like with punk, like, you know what I mean? Like you're not cool unless you're listening to shit that's like 20 years old.
Or it has to be some local shit that like nobody fucking
like-
knows about.
Exactly. And that's when I
Yeah.
was listening to like Aesop and Atmosphere, like all that like indie rap stuff that was like under the radar. Like, so Kanye like didn't even like, I didn't listen to like any like mainstream hip hop really. It was all
Right.
like, man, you don't know about real hip hop. I'm 15 years old. Let me tell you about this. I'm a 15-year-old white kid. Let me tell you about real hip hop.
Did you go to a majority white school?
Yeah.
Yeah, same. So yeah, like this,
I
this
grew up
all
in Jersey,
tracks.
so it's not
It's
like-
all-
I grew up in Jersey, so it's not like there was like, like majorly white high school, but it was definitely a majority white. High school.
there are 2 kinds of white rap fans, right? And there are like the white kids that went to like a non-majority like white high school, right? Which means that like they actually like listen to like good shit that like doesn't scare women at parties, right? And then you've got like white boys that like grew up in like a majority white high school that listen to shit that like will fucking clear a party out. Like immediately, like someone like remember that meme you were telling me about the other day, the one where people are like jumping over the bar. He's going for the juke. He's going for the aux cable. Like he's gonna put on death grips. Like that's what I'm talking about. And like
because I was listening to I was watching like skateboard videos and like those old DC videos, like Josh Kalis would like skate to Full Clip by Gangstar while he's skating at Love Park in Philly, and I'm like, man,
whose world is this? Yeah, no, I yeah, exactly. The most like white boy shit ever. And I've never heard it put more succinctly than like when I was I worked at a zoo. I'm not gonna say which one, but I did at one point work at a zoo, and I was like talking with like the dude who was like an older gentleman, right? A black man that was like you like rap, you like hip hop, what kind of hip hop you listen to? And I started naming names. He's like, so you only like the shit that's like fucking 20 years old that like nobody fucking listens to anymore. Now it's good enough for you, right? Now that like nobody fucking gives a shit.
Dude, I'm still kind of like that. Like a new band, look like that band Jesus Piece, is like a hardcore band, came out, and when they
They're
first
awesome.
came out,
Like fuck.
I was like, what is this? Now, like their first album's like, I don't know, probably getting towards 10 years old or something, and I'm like, and then like it's like, I'm like, I want to go up and be like, I just got into Jesus Piece, and it's like, what, dude? Like we're like,
bro, they've been around for like a minute now.
Yeah, it's not new.
Fucking what the fuck is the name of that band that was like super fucking new metal?
Like Code Orange.
Nah, Vane. That's it. Vane. Yeah.
I saw Vane at This Is Hardcore.
You did? Did you get it? Did you see the Windbreakers?
Windbreakers? Yeah, I saw a bunch of dudes in the Windbreakers, and then like I saw how expensive they were online after that.
Dude, they were like $100.
Dude, they were way more than that, dude. I just saw one for sale. Here, look, I'll show you on my Facebook. I just saw one of these for sale for $100. Still to this day.
Which one? Which year was it? Was it the 2017 one?
Probably was 2017. It was the same year that I saw the. Dude, look here. I'll send you. I'm gonna send you.
I'm putting up the Hate 5.6 shit, man. Like.
Oh, put on the. Okay. Yeah, I was here for this.
Okay.
See all the Windbreakers?
Check.
I'm gonna stop recording now, all right? Because this is like the end of the episode, all right? So if you want to catch us live Wednesdays, fucking Fridays, Sundays, 6 p.m. EST. See you then.